Breaking news on the killing of 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Preddy. Just minutes ago, we learned from DHS that the Border Patrol agents involved in that shooting have been placed on administrative leave.
A preliminary DHS report into the incident obtained by NBC News confirmed that 2 federal officers fired their guns during this encounter. The report did not make any mention of Preddy attacking the officers or brandishing a gun, as DHS Secretary Kristi Noem has claimed.
Meanwhile, Noem is facing growing pressure to step down because of these deaths at the hands of agents operating under her leadership. 2 Republican senators, Thom Tillis, Lisa Murkowski, they've joined Democrats in calling for her resignation.
And DHS Secretary Kristi Noem must resign or face impeachment. I don't know. We're going to keep talking. Just give me 10 minutes. Just give me 10 minutes. I beg you. Please don't let them have the show. 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 Here is the reality that people like this ugly man don't understand. We are Minnesota strong, and we will stay resilient in the face of whatever they might throw at us.
This is a moment the news movement filmed on January 13th in Minneapolis, showing a man who appears to be Alex Preddy interacting with federal immigration agents 11 days before Border Patrol shot and killed him. Our footage was analyzed by the BBC, whose facial recognition technology confirmed his identity to a 97% degree of accuracy. On the morning of January 13th, our team received a tip that federal agents were blocking a street at the corner of East 36 and Park Avenue in Minneapolis. We arrived around 10:15 a.m. We saw observers shouting at the agents as they walked back to their vehicles. When they started driving away, the man kicked their taillight. An agent then got out of the vehicle, grabbed him, and pushed him to the ground. During the altercation, agents fired tear gas and pepper balls into the crowd. They continued to hold the man down before they retreat and he walks away. The man in our footage is wearing a similar outfit to what Preddy was wearing on the day he was killed. What appears to be a gun is also visible above his waistband.
Caring for people was at the core of who he was. He was incapable of causing harm. Alex carried patience, compassion, and calm as a steady light within him. Even at the very end, that light was there. I recognized his familiar stillness and signature calm composure.
Hey, there is not Jeff. Oh, there he comes back, Jeff.
Way to make an entrance, Jeff.
That was a dramatic.
I was straightening my hat. I didn't want to appear until it was on. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 68 of The Whiners on January 29th, 2026. Ryan, Morgan, and Jeff with you as we always are on Thursday nights. And tonight we have the great pleasure of Nathan Daly joining us. I'm sure many of you know who Nathan is. For those of you who don't, let me tell you, he's a retired police officer, having served for 2 years with the Dunwoody Police Department. One of my favorites. I don't know about you guys. Love the Dunwoody Police Department. 6 years with the DeKalb County Police Department. And he's also the founder of Blue Phoenix Consulting, offering expert guidance and support in police policy practices and procedures. And he is the host of the very popular Real Nathan Daily, kicking ass on YouTube, focusing on law enforcement issues. And we are very happy to have him here. How you doing, Nathan? How you doing, Ryan? How you doing, Morgan?
I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to have you, Nathan.
Man,
Wonderful.
the pleasure. The pleasure is all mine. I'm excited. First of all, that intro is amazing, right? I have to clip that.
For sure. You're allowed.
Awesome.
Well, this is the Whiners, and we, at least a couple of us, tend to sip while we speak. We made you aware of that, Nathan. Have you decided to indulge in any sort of an adult beverage?
Yeah, actually, so I was looking for I have some Hennessy White, and I don't know where actually I put it. That's usually oh, nice.
Okay,
Nice.
just let you know.
Yeah, I picked that up in the Bahamas. I think there was a time where you just couldn't get it here. I don't know if that's still the case.
Used to be.
Still the case?
I think you
Yeah.
have to go to in the airport to get that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I've been sipping on that real slow. I just actually, I don't know where it is. So I kind of missed out on the opportunity. What are you guys drinking on tonight?
If you don't know where your favorite drink is, that means either you're not a serious drinker or you're drinking way too much, and that's why you're lost. That could go either way.
Listen,
Yeah,
I try to keep my habits under wraps. I try to, but normally I do. Like, people think it's apple juice. I tell them it's apple juice, but it's usually Hennessy White.
All right. Well, with us, you don't have to fake it. I'm drinking a Pinot Noir. I think it may be available only at winestore.com. So if you're not in North Carolina or Virginia, forget it. This is made by a small producer in France, and I think it was just released. And I am enjoying it. How about you, Ryan?
Well, look at you, Jeff. I'm drinking a Pinot Noir also. And mine's a little under $20, and it's got a little bit of some bubbles in there, but generally it's pretty smooth, mildly sweet, I wouldn't say it's peppery. It says it's peppery. Definitely I have the violet taste there. It's supposed to be pretty drinkable. So
supposed to
I'm
be,
going to
right?
drink it. Let me just say, I'm going to drink it.
Yeah, they take their wine pretty seriously. I'm drinking water tonight, so keep
That's supposed to be drinkable too, water.
Now,
We were talking before we started the show about how we've been dealing with the Minneapolis shootings for a couple or so weeks now. And we had some really good guests. I don't know if you know Andrew Branca or Shipwreck Crew, Bill Shipley. You familiar with those guys?
No. But I wonder if this is the one I took a look at the other day. Was it yesterday you guys had the discussion? Day before yesterday?
Well, on Probable Cause, we had Shipwreck Crew on Tuesday night, and we also had them on this show a week or two ago. And Andrew Branca is also a self-defense expert. And we also had Rachel Van Landingham on one of the shows. She's a law professor. The one thing that I feel like...
She was interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too. She's nice. We didn't totally see eye to eye, but that's okay. The one thing that I think has been missing a little bit is somebody with your particular expertise and emphasis, and that is, how could the techniques have been better? We've been focusing on what made the shooting, both shootings now, lawful or not lawful, but what about the techniques? Should we show some video and talk about it?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I only have about 500 videos down there.
2 minutes before the shooting, Alex Preddy is seen arguing with officers. One officer pushes him back and an
Lower the
individual is
volume.
detained.
Let me know when we should stop it. This is the thing that led up to the Preddy confrontation and the fatal shooting.
About a minute later, Preddy is seen.
So you can just talk over it, Nathan.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges in general is, when you have these videos, no one really talks about the origin of everything, right? You could pause it right here.
Okay.
Let me just say this. One of the biggest misconceptions of policing and people observing police encounters is a lot of people don't have a clue as to why it started, right? People just forget that these things there's an onset, right? There's a beginning to it. And if you don't know the beginning, then you can't judge the middle, you can't judge the end without knowing why are we here, how we got here, and then also examine the behavior of the citizen that the officer or the agent is encountering. One of the biggest problems with this video is people they forget to ask the big questions like, what were the agents doing? That's very important because their entire investigation and whether or not the citizens are interrupting that, interfering with that, impeding on that is going to have a big impact on the response that you get. Even the type of criminal that the agents are engaging with or trying to engage with, the force that the agents use to remove obstacles is going to be a lot higher, right? So there's so many different variables a lot of people just don't understand. So for example, if I'm dealing with a subject and they're jaywalking, right, my patience is going to be a lot more I'll have a lot more patience for them because it's a very non-violent, non-threatening offense. But if I'm investigating or I'm in the process of capturing or subduing a person who's a felony, it's a felony related crime, they're a violent offender, then my patience and tolerance level with people trying to interfere with that is going to be a lot higher, or my tolerance will be a lot lower. And then you're going to see me be a little bit more aggressive with how I deal with them, just because now you're interfering with my safety. And so that is always going to be priority. The officer, the agent safety takes precedence over what people feel like or what they want to do. So in this situation, before we knew why they were there, we didn't really know, right? So in this moment, you have the agents kind of shoving this lady out the way. A lot of people are like, oh my God, he's assaulting. But apparently they had a conversation with this group prior to. If you're given a legal command to remove or, disperse or stay on one side or don't come over here for whatever reason, it doesn't matter how you feel, and you violate that, you don't know why, why they asked you to do that. You put yourself in a very compromising position with law enforcement, because now they can easily say you're obstructing, and that is a catch-all, right? You're interfering with, I can't focus on my job because you're constantly interfering with what I need to do. So instead of me focusing on the enemy or focusing on the combatant or focusing on the criminal or looking out for whatever I'm supposed to be doing, I now have to worry about you. I have to worry about what you're doing, and I can't have that. And so people don't understand this part, the beginning part. It matters. He just didn't start pushing people for no reason, right? Yeah, there's a reason for why he did it. And this piece right here is where everything goes wrong. You cannot touch the agents, right? I was taught as an officer, no one touches your uniform, right? If they touch you, they go to jail. That's how I was taught as a police officer. We took it very seriously.
Even if it's just lightly touching you, that's not even
don't do it. Because again, especially depending on what I'm investigating, right? And this is here, no matter how citizens want to interpret it, it has nothing to do with how they feel. It's about what the officer feels. And
it obviously wasn't an accident. That's the other thing. He did it intentionally. He's objecting to what the guy's doing. He's trying to stop him.
Correct. Yeah. What I would use in this, there was another encounter, the first encounter that he had, and the agent was ushering him off the street. And when they made contact with him, he had his hands up. So for me, as someone who looks at these things, I'm looking at, well, he knows better, right? He's shown in a previous video that he knows how to follow instructions. He knows how to make himself not look threatening. He knows how to say, hey, I'm good. I'm not a threat. And he was never touched, assaulted, or sprayed, or thrown down to the ground. It wasn't until he did what? He didn't have his hands up, and he inserted himself in front of that agent while that agent was doing his job. Whether you liked how he did it or not, it's really not up to you as an individual, right? And if you don't understand why that agent is doing his job in the way that he's doing it, you don't have to like it. Use of force in any capacity doesn't look pleasing. But if you don't understand the context, which a lot of these, I call them social justice warriors, a lot of them, they don't understand, and they insert themselves, and next they find themselves in handcuffs, or in worst case scenarios, hurt or killed.
And also, just from that standpoint, because I think the use of violence and your use of force, pardon me, it's twice. I think it's important that you maybe make some distinctions for us, because like it's different if it's in a war situation than it is in a civilian situation.
That's true. That's true. So I think where the misconception comes in is people just don't really know what agents and officers, the type of latitude we have with dealing with people. I have a philosophy that I teach. It's called the ATM method. That means I ask you, I tell you, and then I make you. And it doesn't necessarily have to go in that order. The reality is I have a job to do. I'm not here to negotiate. I don't negotiate with criminals. I don't negotiate with people who don't follow instructions. I have patience. I have a tolerance level, but at the same time, I have to ask you, I have to tell you, and then eventually at some point I have to make you. That's the part of the job people don't like to see. But how many times do these agents have to tell people to follow instructions?
And the footage shows that there were multiple encounters. And so the push was probably after they ran out of patience. And it's
we're in the make you.
Yeah,
I'm in the make you stage now, right? I've asked you, I've told you, right? And that's how it works, And I think these politicians are doing, and these activists, these politicians and activists, I think that these are politicians, there's activists acting as politicians. They're doing the citizens in their areas, like the mayor and their community, a disservice, because they're in a position where they need to be educating people on how to maneuver, and what, hey, listen, you guys, if you interfere with them, this is how you peacefully do it. If you do it outside of these parameters, they're going to jack you up. Okay. And there's nothing I can do about it.
I'm so glad you said that, because I've been getting into it with people on Facebook, and I'm being accused of being a bootlicker. And I'm like, look, this is stupid, dangerous, and illegal. If you listen to me, then people, or not me specifically, but my attitude, then people may not get killed. This attitude that you can tell by the way they behave and talk that they really think they can get away with almost anything just because they frame it as a protest.
Well, actually, on that point, I actually had one case where somebody said, we do not have to listen to what any of these officers say.
Yeah.
And
now so many examples. So to interject, so I guess the order was, do we know what the order was that I guess these three individuals were not following?
Get off the road, I think. What do you think, Nathan?
I don't know, and I think that's what makes this case so tricky, right? If here's the caveat, right? If the agent was acting outside of the color of law, right? If he wasn't acting like within the boundaries of the law, then all of these actions are not, they're not okay for them to do, right? So the question is, what were they doing? Why were they there? What were they investigating? And why did they need that area? What was it about that area that they did not want these citizens to basically insert themselves in, right? Like, so if I have a crime scene and I say, hey, this area, I can't allow you to cross this area. This is a crime scene. I don't have evidence tape, but I'm telling you right now that you can't cross over here. If you do, it's going to be a problem, right? You're contaminating the evidence. You're contaminating the scene. You might not agree with that. You might not like that. It doesn't matter, right? Once I give you a command and that command is lawful, right? Meaning that once we go back and look at everything and we find out that, hey, Officer Daly was absolutely correct, that this area was a crime scene. He told you, he warned you, and you kept crossing that boundary. Guess what? It's jail, whether you like it or not. Now I have to use a level of force on you to get you to comply. So the question is, what happened initially? We have video clips and conversations of the agents having a peaceful conversation with them at the scene. And then at some point they're backing them away. The question we have to get back into is, why did you not follow? Why did you not adhere to what was told to you? Why did you not follow instructions? Why did you not comply? And so whether you liked the command, whether you felt like it wasn't lawful, that's not your place to, at the moment, to violate it, right? You document, take the notes, and then you follow up, and then you file your complaints, and then you go from there, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But in the moment, that's not where you pick your battle. And unfortunately, because we don't know, right? So let's say that the agents had a lawful reason to tell them to stay off the street, for whatever reason, I do not know. But say it's a legitimate reason. Well, then they're obligated to listen. And so this entitlement, the question is, where does it where do our citizens get this entitlement where they feel like they just don't have to listen, because they don't like.
I think it's their First Amendment right to protest, and part of that is you can be in the street. It's an important issue, and they're wonderful people. Can I play a clip from what you?
Are you about to change the subject?
Well, not exactly, because I just wanted to follow up on something Nathan just said that relates to what he said on his own show. But go ahead, Morgan. I can come back to that. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'll let you.
All right. So there's something you said on your own show. If you don't mind, I'd like to take a look at it, having to do with whether or not the agents were acting lawfully, whether it was correct for them to do what they said. So this is what you said on your podcast.
The moment he interjected himself and intervened and blocked or obstructed, whatever you want to call it, while that agent was assaulting that other lady, you guys, that could change the entire dynamic of the situation. If Border Patrol was not justified in their interactions, if they had no legal justification for what they were doing, then this changes the whole dynamic of the situation.
Well, how does it change it, and why did you refer to it as an assault?
Well, so that I'm using the language that's being used online. People are saying, hey, if this is not lawful, then this would be considered an assault, right? So on my channel, I try to cover both angles of the conversation to get people to understand that here's the big idea. The big idea is if he's justified, if he's not justified, what does that look like, right? Anytime an officer or an agent is acting outside the color of law, outside of their parameters, then they find themselves being charged, right? You're not protected by the law. You could violate people's constitutional rights if you're not doing things properly. And so let's say this is an agent who did not have the authority to do what he did. Then you're pushing someone, that's an assault. That's an assault. Every time you put your hands on someone and it's not lawful, that is an assault, even as an agent. And so now the question is, if I'm a citizen and I'm watching someone be assaulted and they don't have a perfect example, if you and your wife or you and your friends are out, or siblings or whatever, somebody you care about, and we're walking the street, we're doing our thing, and we're just monitoring, and you didn't commit a crime, you're just kind of just minding your business, and an agent comes up and starts abusing their authority and they don't have a legal reason to do so, well, you have a right to defend yourself. You have a right to protect yourself against said authority, right?
Well, that brings up the issue of citizen arrest, both from the officer's perspective. I'd like to get your opinion on whether or not cops or federal agents have the authority that ordinary citizens do to make citizens arrests, and also whether or not a citizen, we don't usually think of it this way, but the way the citizen arrest statute is written, it doesn't say that it applies to only non-police officers. So do federal agents have the authority that ordinary citizens have, which is to say, do they need, for this to be kosher, what we're looking at, does it have to be part of an immigration law enforcement operation, or could they do it simply because they're obstructing traffic, which, might be a misdemeanor?
That's an interesting question. The way I look at it is, at the end of the day, we're all citizens of this country, right? So the difference is that, one, this is a job, right? So within the job, you're obligated to operate within these parameters. And so what was always taught to me is that the only difference between me as an officer and the citizen is that I'm employed to do it. I'm obligated to do it. The citizen is not obligated to chase criminals and arrest people, right? You have the luxury of kind of walking away and not having to do it. As me, though, I took a oath, right? So my job is different. So I have an expectation. A citizen does not have an expectation to do those things. Are they protected when they do those things? Yes, they are protected when they do those things, assuming, though, that they've done it properly, right? That they've analyzed the situation properly. They used proper judgment, right? We've had cases before where citizens have made citizen arrests. Officers have made citizens arrests off duty, so you're able to do these things. The issue is a lot of times citizens aren't trained to properly identify
but my question is, can a federal officer such as Border Patrol or ICE, while they're on duty, can they make a citizen arrest for a local offense?
No, I don't know the answer to that. What I would say is probably not while they're on duty, right? Again, when you're in uniform, you're operating in that capacity. No, I guarantee you they probably cannot. I don't think that's gonna fly with their superiors. I'm pretty sure there's policy on that as well, right? So again, they're working, so they are obligated to their policies while they're working. It's different when you're off duty and you're not associated with the uniform, you're not associated with the badge, and say you're out with family or friends or doing your own thing, and you see something, you see a crime occurring, and then you say you detain them and hold them for law enforcement. And so, yeah, I mean, they're absolutely, they have that right to do that, but not on duty. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of touch on something that you were speaking about, the difference between civilian and a person who has the badge. I think that when you're saying that you have an obligation to do this job, but I think it's also, you're held to a higher standard.
Absolutely.
You have to have the discipline, you have to have the discernment of knowing how to approach a situation, even when you have protesters that are being loud, obnoxious, in your face, trying to incite violence, because you have some of these actions where they're trying to incite these actions to make a federal agent look bad, get the clip, make it go viral. That I think is kind of further inciting more people at these protests and more division in this country. But my critique is with the state. How are they upholding and how are they making sure that the citizens are secure with what they're doing? We've had people critique them for wearing the masks. They continue to wear the masks. They claim that it's about doxing, but doxing a federal agent is a crime. So you shouldn't be worried about, being doxed. These Border Patrol and ICE agents, they're not wearing body cam or identifiable badge numbers. What are your thoughts on this? Because I feel like they're not meeting the standard to show the public they're in good faith. We're kind of this new thing where they're talking about warrantless entries into homes. They can do that on I think it's final removal orders. And I think they had just done that in Minneapolis.
Administrative warrants, right?
Yes.
They're administrative, not judicial warrants.
Where they're going over a judge warrant saying that they can do that just because it's a final eviction notice, or kind of be akin to that. They have been doing that in Minneapolis, and the man who was, I think it was a particular man who was arrested, was just released because his Fourth Amendment right was infringed upon. What are your take on this? Because I don't see any kind of good faith effort. I would say the administration, they're kind of rolling back because they've seen the public outcry of getting rid of Bavino.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah. So, but they're still not doing the badge numbers. I have some footage.
Let's knock those points one at a time, because you covered a lot and I want to touch on all of those. You made some great points. Let me say this. Let me give you my thoughts just in general with the whole ICE and thing, this whole situation. I'm an advocate for professionalism. Doesn't really matter. I love law enforcement, as you guys can see. I have no issue calling it out things that are not productive as law enforcement, because I like to rebuild the relationship. Since I've done the job, I've used every tool on my belt, so I can speak on use of force and what it feels like to be in situations. I've almost been killed a couple times in the line of duty. I can tell you about that. So I understand the nuances. And so when I speak on it from a place of what's really required to make an impact. The issue with the ICE agents is a couple things with the federal agents kind of working in this law enforcement capacity. This is not their normal functionality, right? They don't have the experience to navigate civilian encounters like this. They just don't have the experience. It's not what they were designed to do. And this is why we have such the type of outcomes that we're getting right now. The way it's supposed to work is that they're supposed to be partnered with local law enforcement when they carry out their activities. So I work special operations as an officer, and we would work in tandem with federal agents. I've worked with the DEA, the ATF. I've worked with who else? The FBI on cases, and we always partner together, especially if they're doing something big sweeps and things of that nature. We partner together, and we would handle a lot of the red tape incidents because, again, this is federal, operating on state grounds. And so it's a lot of red tape and can be tricky. And so we'd always partner together. We would do traffic stops for them, for their cases and things like that. It just smooths things over, right? And what's missing from all these incidents, if local law enforcement was present with ICE or with Border Patrol, these wouldn't be problems. You know why? Because I would sic the officers actually on the citizens and get them in line, right? Hey, we have Renee Good blocking the road. Hey, officer, can you handle that for us? So we need to get through. She's blocking traffic. All right, no problem. Let the sheriff or whoever, let them take care of it. That's how it should work.
That's because it's not their primary objective of that DEA or FBI.
It's not their functionality. It's not their, they don't have the experience dealing with citizens and agents, federal agents, you know, they have a sense of, you know, lore about them, right? There's a sense of a little bit of pride, a little ego, a little entitlement. They're not used to dealing with citizens with, you know, throwing the middle finger at them and throwing stuff, spitting on them. Federal agents are more like a scalpel, right? They have a specific objective, a specific skill set, and they're attacking a specific problem, right? They're not out here being law enforcement officers, right? They're just not. And so they act in a law enforcement capacity, but not the same way as local, state, and city officers act. They are not accustomed, nor do they have the training, a lot of them, to deal with civil.
Well, that's why the citizen arrest. That's why the citizen arrest issue is so important, because not only do they lack the skill, but you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't sound 100% sure, but you're saying you believe they don't have that authority. So therefore, what are they supposed to do when in other words, like they're trying to get people out of the street? Does it have to raise to a certain threshold, whether that's a federal offense? And if not, can they just have to do nothing? Because
no, they have laws. I mean, there's federal laws that they have. They have they have the same violations as us as state officers. It's not really a big difference, except for it's two different branches of government, right?
But it's like saying crowd control, though. If, for example, crowd
control.
There
are legal experts like Janine Younes and others who have been arguing that they don't have the authority to use the federal statute for interfering with unless they're like very specific, like in the middle of an arrest or something like that.
No, that's false. Because here's the reality of it. If I'm a group of agents, there's 5 of us, and here's what they don't want to actually be honest about is this is the reality of the situation. You have a group of agents. They're here on the soil investigating, right? They're looking for illegal immigrants or criminals who are not citizens, and they have a known area. They're going there to go pick the person up. Now you have this cult group, right, that's following them around for the sole purpose of interfering with their job, for the sole purpose of preventing them from carrying out their operation. So again, if you know what my operation is, you know where I'm going, and you show up and you prevent me or try to prevent me from doing my job, you are now in violation of a federal statute. Right?
Which one? So, the one that prohibits impeding an officer?
That's correct. It's like something 111.
Oh, it's 18 USC subsection 111. Yeah. Actually, we've been looking at these things. So, we only play lawyers on TV. So, from that standpoint, would you say that it is a plus that Bovino is out and that Holman is coming in? And just as a reminder, we have this this picture from then. Well, there was a lot of work that was done under the Obama administration, right, for deportation. So, and I will say this: the Trump administration, President Trump said they're going to cool it down a little bit. He said that in the last 24, 48 hours. So it's clear that the attitude across the board, including amongst his supporters, is, hey, this thing is going off the rails.
Yeah.
And you've said some interesting things here. This question of, local law enforcement should be involved, which I don't think you said here, but it appears to me that they are being told not to accompany them.
or they're getting
Of course.
iced out. I would have.
Well, iced out. Oh, Morgan.
That's good. But I think that's done on purpose.
Of course.
Yeah, and it's a division tactic. I mean, we're seeing,
Of course.
from me, and you have a lot of people who are speaking out on this, of I find sound reasons, is that this is kind of an effort to militarize the streets. We see a lot of how I take it is that it would be one thing if these ICE agents were breaking down, big drug cartels and these organizations of human trafficking, but they have it on their website, people that they're getting, it's, DUIs. I mean, there are people who have actual charges, but there are people that they are getting that don't, that they you can also find that are just people that are seeking asylum legally, or I think DACA recipients, they're going for DACA recipients as well. But what I find a legitimate critique is the fact that they are using surveillance techniques and broadening that and going into the streets looking like a military occupation. You have a lot of veterans who are speaking out on that front, saying that the tactics, the software, it's all the same. Palantir is one that comes to mind, but there's also this one. Would your police agency ever train with Israel?
Would my agency ever do it?
Yeah, like any of yours. Are you familiar with?
Not that I'm aware of. No, we haven't. Yeah, we haven't.
Well, the Border Patrol and ICE, they have this relationship with Israel where they train in counterterrorism.
I can see that.
And they are using some of their surveillance techniques. This is Paragon Graphite, which is akin to an Israeli surveillance Pegasus, which they can just hack phones and these signal chats. They're able to hack them now. I find that those are legitimate critiques that are not being addressed. Is that there are legitimate concerns that once you give up your rights, the government is not going to give it back. You have this mass surveillance. Let's see. Do I have another slide on that?
Well, as you're pulling that up, no, go ahead, Ryan.
No, you first, Nathan. You're the guest.
As you're pulling that up, I think one of the greatest misconceptions, I think, if people don't really understand the government and what their true objective is. If I can just speak candid, right? Like, let me say this. God forbid, right? If this was a situation where you have two wings on the same bird, right? Opposite wings of the same bird, red versus blue. What if this was a big idea of the person in charge to say, hey, make me look bad, right? Make me look bad. Give me a reason to put boots on the ground. Give me a reason to put 1,500 soldiers in a city, right? Give me an excuse so I can occupy this area. Why? What reason? So I think people are so emotionally caught off guard. They're so easily manipulated emotionally that they can't see the bigger play behind, right? The way I look at it is I'm looking at these videos. Some of them seem too well orchestrated, every angle captured. It just seems too easy to me. But again, this is someone who knows what it looks like to be in real situations. I could tell when people are acting. I could tell when people are not responding. Guns are going off, nobody's jolting, no one is moving. When I remember when the January 6th situation happened, I saw video footage. I was like, oh, these are actors. These are actors. And so, but to an untrained eye, they think that this is a real thing. No, I'm looking at an operation being done, right? And so the question is, who is against who, and what's the end goal? I know that there are people in our government that will assault their own people in order to push a particular policy, right? To push a particular agenda. I know we have politicians that are willing to create havoc on the street in order to justify putting military inside a city. What are you willing to do as a leader? What are you willing to do? What's the end goal? And here's the thing. Are you doing it because you want to control the city? Are you doing it because you need an excuse because there's something going on that's dangerous that you don't want to release to the public? So you have to try to create a false flag situation, right? Snowden already told us about what's actually the reality of things that are going on. People just didn't really pay attention. Unfortunately, in this country, we walk around with our eyes wide shut, and we relinquish our freedoms willingly to the government because we're ignorant. And so the problem is all they do is create a situation where they put this idea of fear, or they push some type of fear campaign, and we're willing to relinquish our freedoms little by little by little. And if you look at the history of things over the last 30, 40 years, that's exactly what you see. Little by little, after 9/11, it was like, yeah, go ahead, do whatever you need to do.
I was going to just bring that up, actually, because I was discussing with one of my friends just along the lines of what Morgan is saying, because he was upset that I have, with Jeff and others, we've been looking at the law narrowly defined in the incidents. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the law seems to be almost 100% on the side of these officers. And there are fewer cases when it goes against the law enforcement. But what you just said is exactly the bigger thing I was thinking about. After September 11th, the Patriot Act itself was supposed to go out of existence in 2005. It was supposed to be sunsetted, and it was, 2002 that the Homeland Security Act went into existence. That never had a sunset clause. And prior to that, people say, well, how did we deal with all this stuff? Well, it was multi-agency. It was, in fact, decentralized. Everybody's for decentralization. It was actually decentralized. It was less big government. Right. So what do you say to that? I think you already are, but maybe you can continue on that thought.
I mean, I think people misunderstand me, right? I can analyze a situation based on what the law says. I can tell you based on how we're supposed to be trained. And then you can ask me what I think about our government and are we going in the right direction? Do we give too much? I'm all for less government, right? But what I see is I could see the game, though. I see the game being played. And so I'm a realist. I just keep it real. I haven't drunk the Kool-Aid. I don't know what they're putting in the water that has these people, not really understanding what's going on, but we'll lose this country, right? I think I like my dictators honest and direct and straightforward, right? I can respect that. I don't like being lied to and then gaslit that you're not, snatching freedoms from under us. Recently, I remember I was working a case, and this is just to spin back around on this. I remember I was working a case, and it was a home invasion. And I didn't even know we're capable of doing this, right? This is before we got the flock system. And that's another thing, right? Slowly and surely, when you start seeing these federal dollars start coming in for these high-tech equipment, honestly, it's cool. Like, I love it. But then I start realizing that, man, if this shit gets in the wrong hands, it's a problem, right? If this thing gets abused, it's a problem. Who watches the watcher, right? At the end of the day, I'm good. I have a good heart. I have integrity. I think the tools should be used for good, right? To find bad guys. At the same time, I know just with a switch of a button, these things can be taken from us and they could be used and operated on a federal level as well. And I had a situation. We did a home invasion. We're looking for the suspects, and we called Ring, and we tapped into every single Ring camera in that neighborhood, and we watched and followed the vehicle until we can get a license plate. And the entire time, even though I'm like, okay, I'm glad we got them, I'm like, damn, I didn't know we could tap into Ring cameras. It's so the problem is, though, again, these are two different conversations. Like, yeah, we can talk about breaking down situations, and we can talk about how we have a government that is also usurping, right, the powers of the people. But that's the people's problem. The people are asleep at the wheel, not the government. The government does whatever we allow the government to do, right? But we, the people, at the end of the day, we have to wake up and say, and stop being so lazy. all the government is doing is equal exchange. Hey, I'll give you this for this, and we take it, right? And so a lot of people aren't really understanding that concept, and back in the day, in the beginning of this country, they would have fought for a lot less, they would have went to war behind a lot less that we see today. So those are two different, discussions, but overall, just so you kind of get where my mind is at. I don't like a lot of government interference, and that's why I said, even when the feds are on the ground, they're supposed to be in partnership with the state. Now, here's the issue. The reason why I say two opposite wings of the same bird is all of a sudden you have this guy and it's always in these blue states, right? These blue cities, right? Where they're willing to purposely not make that teamwork. They don't want that teamwork, right? They want this to fail. They want this operation to look bad. They want to create havoc. They want to create this hatred for this group, for the agency, right? There's a purpose behind it. And that to me is, I could see it. To me, it's obvious that this is what they want to happen. The real question is why, right? If the Democrats are in on it and the Republicans are also in on it, the question is, what is the big picture, but that's just me.
Well, I have a question about that, it's funny. The chat going on in our live chat is very interesting because the thing, Nathan, you have an audience now that is just gone global. We have an international audience. We have Americans who are struggling through this, and I do want to say that there are questions about why does it seem that the violence needs to happen, and then some people are saying. So I wanted to get to what you just said, and in terms of the bigger story. So I'm going to use a Russian saying because some of the Russians are in our chat that I learned today. It's "V'es par ushova svistok," which is all the steam goes into the whistle. So this idea of controlled burns, right, to prevent runaway forest fires, or if you're in the Alps, they shoot a cannon to trigger a safe, controlled avalanche to prevent something more destructive. So one question I have is, because this is Minnesota, this is 2020, George Floyd, Derek Chauvin. It's this same area. So yes, it's blue state, blue counties, and all this. But I think even more significant than that is, you have a collapse on a monthly basis of manufacturing jobs, African-American unemployment, the dollar's been falling. I watched another thing, Alabama, it's $62 for a 3-pound beef roast, 50-year mortgages. In other words, you have a much broader thing that's got the entire population, regardless of party, upset, enraged. And so whatever you want to say about the establishment would like people to blow off steam on something that is not quite, the same as saying, hey, my leaders need to actually solve this real problem of the whole nation. What do you think of that?
It's a distraction, right? I think ultimately people aren't really focused on the things that really actually impact their livelihood. They get caught up in the rhetoric that the news and the misinformation and disinformation that's put out in the media. You have a lot of bad actors who come out here and they lie. These guys they just lie, And the thing is, these lies get reinforced by people that the citizens are supposed to trust, right? We're supposed to trust these individuals that are put in office, that are running in these elections. We're supposed to actually trust what they say. But again, the reality is, when people go home and they open these bills up and they go to the grocery store, the reality sets in, and then they turn the news on, and they're distracted from what the real problem is. And that type of psychological warfare that takes place in this country is the reason why things don't ever get solved, right? People are saying that this whole thing with ICE is a distraction for all the fraud that's been going on and taking place up there as well. You know how these news cycles work. Let's put something in the news to take this conversation off. This is the type of tactics that they do. And it's no different, right? It's the same thing. They do it all the time with everything. And this is why the United States cosplays as a first world country, but has third world problems, right?
Yeah.
And it's
I talked to a friend of mine in Germany. She said, you can become a German citizen in a handful of months. In another country, I forget where it was, also very easy. The backlog here, there's 11.5 million people that are waiting on average 5+ years. So you can't tell me this is just about immigration, because this is not just something that just happened since 2025. This is a long-term problem that we don't really have a policy for. So it seems like people would be very happy to keep this kind of perpetual control burn and never have to rule. And I'm talking about the Washington people. They don't want to actually do the hard work of governing.
I don't think it's either two things. Either they don't have a real answer and they're milking it because they're making money under the table, or they don't want to fix the problem. The problem is profitable, right? And so I think a lot of things that some of these politicians are doing in office are treasonous. To me, if you really look at the things that are going on, the things that they've been getting caught doing, it's treason. The problem is not our government. The problem is the people, right? Like, we are the problem. We're asleep at the wheel. We've relinquished all this power over to our government, which they were never supposed to have in the first place. We were supposed to always be the overseers of their power, right? And we have gotten lazy. This country has gotten extremely lazy, uninterested, right? We struggle with, just basic biology in this country. The literacy rate in this country is off the chain. The poverty rate, homelessness rate, the American dream is looking like the American nightmare for a lot of people. We're just out of order. This country is out of order. It's more the divided states of America. You have people, paid activists, who are put out here to create division, to really create it like a race war scenario. You have all these bad actors and they're being paid now, right? So someone is funding this activity, and it's coming from a political party group where they want to create this division. They want to create this this chaos in a sense. The rumor is the United States can't be defeated from the outside, right? Like, that's a real thing. Our military is just too immaculate. It has to come from the inside. And that's why I think that there's a lot of treasonous behavior, because unfortunately, too many people are easily swayed by the dollar in this country, our politicians included. So if they're easily paid off by corporate interests or paid off by, other countries that are interested in and throwing things around, they do it, right? And that's what we see. The people have to wake up, and the people have to start holding our government accountable. And that's the only time we're going to see things really change, to be honest.
Well, if you were asked by the president to advise him on what to do about the immigration situation, what would you recommend?
I would enforce the policy. I would enforce the laws, just like he's doing, but I would do it. I would be more strategic about it. I think that he put some people in charge that are overzealous. And again, what's the objective? We have basically, let's call it what it is. We have a political party that opened the floodgates in order to create a new voter base. To me, that's what it sounds like to me. Or either or that, or you are partnering with a foreign agency, a foreign country, to sneak in a bunch of sleeper cells for the sake of God knows what against the country, right? Either or, that behavior is not American-like, right? Like, that's betraying.
Yeah, so it has to be enforced. So when Morgan actually said it on this show a couple of weeks ago, abolish ICE.
No, I
but
can't do that.
That's only like half an idea, and maybe not even a good half an idea. The question is, what realistically, what can be done? Because Trump
I would like
is not
to
going to just. What?
Morgan was called out. Morgan, you go.
Yeah, I've never said abolish ICE, but I have said abolish the Patriot Act, which birthed ICE. How is ICE?
I won't dig it up now. I'll dig it up later. I remember we even talked. The reason I remember, Morgan, is Ryan and I even talked about it afterwards, because either he or I asked you, well, what then? And then you didn't have any answer.
Border Patrol was already a thing. You already had institutions that were dealing with immigration prior to the Patriot Act that gave us Homeland Security and the ICE. So I don't really understand why we need to have that. Now we've even talked about how we had the decentralized agencies that are now centralized that are creating databases on American citizens.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is what should be done. Because when we said that, well, what should be done, you didn't know. And then Ryan, I think, said, well, how about Border Patrol? And then you said, okay.
I didn't say I didn't know. I said that we already had an agency taking care of that.
Which is what?
So you're saying,
yeah.
So you're saying when ICE was founded under the Patriot Act, you're saying that they use that as a way to sneak in other policies that are intrusive to our privacy rights, basically, right?
That's true, but that doesn't get at a solution. The Border Patrol is supposed to stay within 100 miles of the border. So I'm saying, well, what should be done about inland? That's a big piece of real estate. And that's what I'm asking Nathan. And then abolish ICE. But now it was Border Patrol who shot Alex Preddy. So,
Well, so I would say, okay, I would extend that, is that the institutions and the method of training these individuals, which, it appears that they are taking a really hand-in-hand relationship with the Israeli government, which you should really be alarmed with what they're doing in the West Bank and in Gaza. There was just this video that went viral of them executing 2 men who were surrendering, or the countless videos of them shooting women or children and women in the streets, or the American doctors who have come back from Gaza and talk about the bullets they pulled out of children's brains. These are the people that ICE and Border Patrol are training with. So that is what I would address, is why are they training with these individuals if they can't even abide by international law, or making these war crimes on a daily basis? And we're seeing it on our streets, with this militarized force, people entering into homes without warrants with silencers. You guys don't believe it, I'll show you the image. You have a woman who's in her scrubs. You have 2 individuals there with silencers on their rifles. This is not necessary.
Well, I use
so that picture though.
I was trying to get an answer out of Nathan. Would that be okay?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Let me, and then I want to speak to that photo. So my answer would be, it's one, I believe that the laws need to be enforced. How you go about enforcing it is one thing. I don't have an issue with agents going and doing targeted arrests. I think that's exactly, that's the only way to do it, right? As an officer, I've arrested people who weren't citizens. The way it worked is, once we arrest you, we send you to jail. The sheriff's department has a connection with ICE, right, and immigration. So once they verify everything, guess what? An ICE or immigration officer will come and actually scoop and pick them up, and they'll take them to another area. From there, they go through the deportation process as it's supposed to work, depending on what city you're in. So we would come across illegals all the time. We didn't hunt for them or anything like that, but say we come across them, whether they were victims of a crime, whether they were involved in an accident, whether they were driving with no license or something to that extent. Then they get arrested and they get sent through the actual process. I don't have an issue with ICE doing their targeted hits. Don't have an issue with that. I think that's exactly what they should be doing. My only issue is that they are not partnered in most cities. Okay, in Florida, it's a different story. You don't hear a lot of problems out of Florida. Florida, along with the ICE agents, are working together. The state agencies are working with the federal agency in order to properly execute a lot of these orders, right? And so it works well when they work together. There is no reason why the federal agents should be there on U.S. soil, operating to the magnitude that they're operating in, and not be backed by the local law enforcement. That is a disaster, because they're not trained, they're not equipped to work in that capacity. They're just not. That's not their functionality. And so if law enforcement was partnering with them, we probably would not have had these deaths, to be honest. So I put the onus back on leadership, the governor, the mayor, whoever, the mayor, right? He's a clown, and he was out of line, right? Because now you're putting the wrong message out to the citizens. And instead of educating them properly on how to interact with law enforcement, how to interact with the agents, you are now saying, I don't want my officers to assist or to be present, but you're actually doing the citizens a disservice, because I truly believe that those lives would not have been taken if the officers, the state, local officers, were
So
present.
you're okay with
one,
you're okay with ICE, at least in the short term, being the lead agency?
yeah, I think they lead. They take point. They take lead, but they do it in partnership with the state and local law enforcement. Absolutely. I
Because
think there's no other way to do it.
I'm not making an argument so much as I'm asking what I hope are relevant questions. One of the
No, they're
commenters
good.
said, thank you. One of the commenters said, oh, I'm wrong because so many American cities are actually within 100 miles of the border. I don't know. I'd have to look at the map and study it. I bet there are a lot inland. The other thing is, again, this is a question, not an argument. Aren't Border Patrol agents really supposed to be right on the border to a large degree? I mean, isn't that how they're allocated, like along especially the Mexican border and where people cross and so forth? So then it becomes a question of, well, how many agents are there? You know, there's a big problem now. You know, millions of people came in illegally. So, you know, what do we do about all that?
The Border Patrol, you know, the problem with our leadership is that operation agendas change based on the leader in charge. And so you can have Border Patrol and they could say, yeah, you're Border Patrol, but we don't have a border today, you know, or yeah, you're Border Patrol, but this is what you're going to allow and not allow. So now you have a president who's saying, I want you to enforce the laws that are actually on the book. And, you know, it always goes back to this idea that, you know, when you have a person that's when you have a situation where people are entitled and you start treating everybody the same, people start feeling like they're being mistreated, right? And like this is what we're seeing today. People are shocked, right, that the United States is now enforcing a lot of their laws that have already existed. You know, things have just gotten so out of control that now it looks like a heavy hand. So
you mean Donald
honest,
Trump didn't invent the concept of limiting access to the country?
Nope. but you know, here's the problem. Honestly, one of the biggest issues, I'm not going to lie, is optics. You know, and one of the things that I believe that the ICE and Border Patrol and the federal agency where they're failing at is their PR is horrible. They lack the compassion to do the job. There's a lack of professionalism, and you can tell that there's a lack of training in the area that they have them assigned to, right? Like,
can you
hey,
believe the idiotic comments they made about the Preddy shooting? I mean, they could have just simply said that he interfered with officers, but instead they call him a terrorist. They said, "Oh, he just approached them." They don't even say the obvious thing, which is the truth, which would help them. What's wrong with them?
Yeah, it would help them.
Yeah.
Well, I would also say there seems to be a taunting, Nathan, where it seems that officers taunt back. One of the videos that everybody shows is the officer who's filming and says, "We've got our little database." I think he's taunting, right? "We've got our database on you. That's why I'm filming you." You can correct me.
But he's serious. There is a database. There's the leaked operation that ICE is also taking is they're making a database of left-leaning radicals. If you want to play this clip, and I guess I can.
Yeah. This is one of the things that Homan said is going to change. What you just said, he said they've been ordered now to stop engaging with these hecklers, protesters, and so forth.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah,
it's okay.
No, go ahead, Ryan.
I thought you were going to play that. It looked like a video, but no.
Yeah, it looked like a video.
I can just move it around a lot if you
No, those agents, honestly, there's an excessiveness to it, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Like even with the Preddy situation, the agent is right in addressing him, detaining him, even arresting him if he's in violation, right? The way he's using that spray is excessive, right? So it's little things like that. People see that, right? So you could be right in carrying out your job, and you could be wrong in how you actually carry the job out, right? So again, you know, you could punch a suspect and then you could punch him 3 times. You know, just because you're allowed to hit him once doesn't mean you're allowed to hit him 3 times. And so
what's the reason that you're saying the pepper spray was excessive? I guess it has to do with what the purpose of it is. So what was the purpose, and how did you make that conclusion?
Well, the thing is, it's all about what is the purpose of the pepper spray, right? So what is the objective of spraying somebody? When you had there was a woman that was off to the sidewalk, she had already been sprayed. after he sprayed, he was spraying Pretty down like he was trying to get the mosquitoes off of him, right? You know,
Yeah.
and this is bear spray. So then he sprays him, and then he turns around, he leans forward and he sprays the lady off to the side. She's not actively engaged with him. She's already feeling the effects of the spray. She's not a threat. She's not, she's not, she's compliant. She's not doing anything. So there was no need to do it. So what you see in these cases is there's like, in some of these cases with the ice, they're just excessive. And the question
is it always the same
this
spray, Nathan? Is it always the same? In other words, is it sometimes as strong as some police departments have different solutions, or whatever the word is, stronger, or is it always the same?
Let me tell you, I had a spray that I used, and I feel bad for saying this, but mine was expired, and I kept forgetting to change it out. I know mine was potent, okay? And I only use my spray if you piss me off to the highest degree. And the reason why I say that, because that spray is a double-edged sword. You know what I mean? So if you get it, I get it. And if I got to get it and you got it, it's a bad day for both of us, right? You can't breathe, right? You struggle breathing. And we had the ones in a little can, and that was horrible. So I heard
it's
that's
non-lethal. That's the point. It's non-lethal, though.
It's non-lethal. It's non-lethal. But you feel like you're being waterboarded. I'm not gonna lie.
Right. Well, here on the Whiners, we know that the different wines have different alcohol content, so that's what I'm kind of analogizing in my mind. You're going to need more spray if it's a weaker brand.
No, I think we use Sabre. That was the brand that we used. I don't know what the feds are using out there, but it doesn't look like it's strong. I'm not gonna lie. It doesn't look like it's strong. It looks like a very, very weak grade or a low grade of pepper spray. Because I'm telling you now, the stuff that we used, if I don't need to do all that. That's too much to me. That'll probably cause some form of suffocation. In my opinion, you don't need that much. And even if you spray it near a person's face, is more than enough to get compliance. They can't function. The spray that I had, you weren't able to function. It's like getting hit with some Raid spray. You see the roaches flip over. Like that's you're incapacitated, and so the spray that they're using, I don't think it's that strong. I'm not going to lie, because I'm looking at it.
That's why I was asking what their intent is. I mean, they want do they want to just kind of make sure they stop for the moment, or do they really want to make sure that they're uncomfortable for some period of time so they can stop worrying about them?
Well, the way the spray works, it incapacitates you. You can't see. You struggle breathing. You're so delirious off of the chemical, burning your face, making it difficult for you to breathe, that your snot's running. All you want to do is get water and get away. Right. And I see them spraying them like they're spraying a wall of paint. And I don't know. I think the biggest problem is the optics. Optics matters in this country. And whoever tells the story first tells the best story. And what I saw is that the feds, when they got in front of the camera, they lied, right? They lied. And you just can't deny that, right? They lied, they exaggerated events and things like that. It's not a good look. And what ends up happening is people who were in support of what you guys are doing on the ground, they now lose that. You lose that support.
You're absolutely right. Hold on. Instead of having a real meaningful conversation about whether or not the shooting was lawful, the people who want it to be unlawful just point to the stupid things that the Trump administration said.
Correct.
Well, I want to address what Morgan, what you were saying, just as something to share here on the screen, because you're talking about the IDF. Now, Eric Schwalm, I don't know if you saw his comment. He's a retired Green Beret. Let's see if I can do this. He had a lengthy statement after Cam Higbee posted all of these signal chats that he had gotten into. Long thing where he goes through his insurgency in Iraq, and he basically makes some kind of a comparison to it. So, I mean, Morgan, I think what your point is ultimately is that it appears it's more militarized on the streets of the United States.
Yeah. You have Vetter, I could play the video shortly after we discuss it, of them talking about tactics they have seen in Afghanistan and Iraq now being deployed at home. And they take great offense to that because that's exactly what they fought against. They fought over there so they didn't have to have that over here. So let me actually just play that. And then
Josephine Guilbeault and Greg Stoker warned that practices once used overseas are now being deployed at home.
This is the military. This was what I was witnessing was military tactics against U.S. citizens.
Guilbeault says what she witnessed during protests reflects a deeper shift in how power is exercised, both abroad and at home.
What they're about to do is going to be so much worse than what we are experiencing now. We watch them fund a genocide. We watch them watch children getting massacred and they did nothing about it, and that has come home to us.
Greg Stoker says the issue extends far beyond one city or one protest.
This is a national issue. This is a federal issue, and Minneapolis is the front lines. They use the same tactics, techniques, procedures. They have the same equipment. They have the same gear. The big lie as veterans that we were told, and I believed it when I was completely propagandized, it was like we were fighting them overseas so we didn't have to have masked gunmen in the streets here.
These veterans.
So the them is what I kind of want to touch on, is now that you have agents who are acting in a provocative manner with, these protesters, whatever you would like to describe them as, they're viewing them as the other, even though they are both American citizens. So much so that you have this president. And, I want to make the clarification that you are completely correct in two wings of the same bird. This is a progressive process that has been happening since the Bush administration, since I feel, the war on terror ever started. This National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, which deems domestic terrorists, as those who are subscribed to anti-fascist, anti-capitalist, and even extends to anti-Christianity. I find this very alarming because this is, you might be cheering it on this administration, but who's to say the next election or the next administration that the domestic terrorism terminology extends and it envelops everybody. Everybody and their mother is now a domestic terrorist, given this, their definitions of it. And it's not like this is just a definition that's not being acted upon. I kind of mentioned it earlier that you have a separate operations that have been disclosed that ICE are taking to create a network, pinpointing different leftists and how provocative they are, making a list and a database based on American citizens. There's this other thing called Mobile Fortify, where I think it's like over 130 American faces are on it. And they're using it to scan people that they're stopping to see if they're a legal citizen or not.
What do you say to that, Nathan? Do you see that there is like a dual use element where some of that is legitimate and some of that maybe is not legitimate? Can you speak to that?
I would say, to speak towards what Morgan was pointing out to in the beginning, is this relationship where they're being trained? We have to also be careful of like the propaganda, right? Because that's a big problem as well. I'm not for a lot of the tiers and things like that, because I look at these things just from a particular point of view. Some people, we just don't like the way things look. We don't agree with certain things. And some people can really take a very serious emotional stance on something, and it could be a little bit overrated, right? And not to dismiss how anybody feels. I respect how everybody feels, but the reality is this, right? I think one of the issues you have them being trained. Agree or disagree. We have our own military. We could be trained over here. I'm a big, I like the conspiracy theories too. Like, I'm big on that. But here's the reality, the net of everything when you really just break it all down. I've had training, as in special operations to deal with civil disturbances. Why is that? Because we have civil disturbances in this country. When people begin to protest, it only becomes a problem when the protests start to become illegal, when it becomes violent, when it turns into riots. Well, guess what? Law enforcement has to engage. If law enforcement can't do it, we have the National Guard that can step in and do it. If it gets worse than that, the military could get called out, right? So there's stages to these things. They evolve. The question at the end of the day is, what are the people doing that open up this can of worms, that forces a government to say we need to put a particular law enforcement presence inside a city because the people are reacting or acting in a way that forces us to have to protect everybody else. We've seen these with the riots. We've seen this with Black Lives Matter and what they were doing. And so this is a real problem. You know, a lot of the people made a big deal about, you know, the Patriot Act brought in a lot of used military equipment that was sent to a lot of law enforcement departments. You know, my department received a lot of those equipment, and we've had to use them on violent offenders. We have to use them when we had riot situations within our borders, right? And so these are real things that we have to deal with. The question is, if the citizenry did not do X, Y, Z, then there's no reason for the state to have to do X, Y, Z. These things are reactive. And I think what people don't want to be honest about is that if you are following the laws and you are acting in accordance to the law and you're protesting peacefully, then there is no legitimate reason for law enforcement to have to step into that magnitude and start coming off like some type of militaristic operation against its own people, right? This is a response to the behavior of the citizens, if I'm not mistaken, right? And so that's why when I see videos like that, I'm just like, okay, well, how did we get here, right? Where did this break down? Where did it go wrong? Because you don't like what this person is doing. You don't like the president. So now you want to throw bricks and burn cars. You can't do that, right? You just can't do that. You know,
I mean, Martin Luther
you know
King
what I'm saying?
Jr., he preached civil disobedience, and he did change the entire United States direction.
Yeah.
And I keep looking at that. I'm like, why is it that we don't go back to, I've been accused of being a racist by quoting Martin Luther King Jr., but I don't know how that works. But no, I'm just saying, I've read what he wrote. I have looked at his speeches, and there is power in what he did. Why is that not the default?
Well, the main characteristic of civil disobedience,
because you have,
well, you know, Jose does civil disobedience. Our friend Jose Vega does some interventions where he, you know, heckles people at events and so forth, but he doesn't act like he's really entitled to it. And that's rare nowadays. The main ingredient, I think, of civil disobedience is that the person doing it acknowledges that it's against the law. They don't pretend or claim that it's not, but they think it's important enough to do it, and they're willing to suffer the consequences. Today's protesters, by and large, don't acknowledge that it's illegal. They think they have a right to chain themselves to a fence.
And how they work. You have, you know, back in, you know, the civil rights era, you have COINTELPRO, you have FBI agents interjecting themselves into groups that would have been nonviolent, would not have taken a violent route, but they were pushed to do so. You have, the Gretchen Whitmore kidnapping case that was thrown out because there was FBI agents present. You have these conspiracy theories based on the George Floyd's riots, where you have bricks popping up and at street corners, people who are saying that they're, for one, I think Antifa is an operation.
It is. Yep.
But
so I don't
Morgan,
think we're acknowledging
my point.
Operation
No. I do acknowledge it. What I'm saying is that there are legitimate people out there who are protesting ICE. The camera is not on those legitimate people.
Nope. Yeah. So when you have these movements that are hijacked, right? And so again, the question is, who paid for these hijackers? So I remember I was actually still recovering from my accident, which is what caused me to have to retire from law enforcement. I remember because it was during COVID, and I remember watching the news. I'll never forget. I'm sitting watching the news, and I'm looking. I said, "Where there's these U-Haul trucks pulling up and people are jumping out and they're handing out bricks, right? There are cars that were abandoned with no license plates in the city of Atlanta that were dropped off, and people say, hey, this car was never here before, right? This car is primed and ready to be lit on fire. It was staged. So you had a criminal element that was inserted into a peaceful protest, right? The question is, who hired them? See, that's the real question. And so people don't ask that, right? You had the incident with Kyle Rittenhouse, right? And I remember the whole thing was like, oh, he's over there killing black people, right? Because it's a Black Lives Matter protest. But all the people there, majority of people who were there protesting, the anarchists, were all white, right? So these people, it's a paid, secret little organization, right? I remember seeing some pamphlets. A friend of mine found some pamphlets where they you call them, you meet up as a group, you get together, and they talk about how they're going to do civil disturbances, right? Their job, they wear the mask and things like that. Hey, we want you to set things on fire, break into this car building or whatever. Let's go in there and damage these cars. They had a mission. So these people infiltrated a peaceful protest, created anarchy. And what happened, it spread like wildfire. Then the people who were there peacefully started to join in on that action, right? We've seen the same thing with, case in point, with Don Lemon and Lady Armstrong, right? They recorded themselves at one of their little small gatherings right before they went into the church to cause a problem. So these are organizations that they and I think these are terrorist groups, right?
Well, shouldn't he have been arrested for that?
She got arrested for it. And
what about Don Lemon?
Well, we don't know what he did exactly, right? I mean, the thing about, to me, it's very cut and dry. What did he do though? If he was behaving as a reporter, that's his defense. I didn't see him screaming out, interrupting the event like a protester. And I don't like Don Lemon, but I want to be fair.
I would say Don was filming to me, I think he's a co-conspirator. I think there's enough to rope him in.
Based on what? He knew they were going to be there.
If his job, right? So think of it like, the way I look at it is like this. So this is the way I would sell it in a courtroom, right? Mm-hmm. His job was to film the anarchy, right? He knew what we were doing. Like he knew what the intent was, what the objective was. He came there for the purpose of, right? He knew or should have known, right? That's kind of how we language.
Let's assume he knew. Let's assume he knew for your theory. Go ahead.
All right. So we assume we know he knew. Right. We know he knew because he said, hey, we are gathered here. This is a secret group.
Hold on, Jeff.
And so we're gathered, and this is his words. These aren't mine, right? He's actually filming the crime. He's filming the crime like any criminal who's like, hey, you guys, we're getting ready to go in here and they're gonna rob the store. I'm just filming us do it. Right, I'm gonna get in the car with them.
He's not a war correspondent here.
Yeah, but knowing that it's going to happen, going to happen is not the same thing as committing a crime.
That's true.
No, Jeff, that's not true. That's not true.
What do you mean? Why?
I think Nathan was going to agree with me. But you're the expert.
They were asked to leave. They were all asked to leave. And the moment you decide not to leave when you're asked to leave, that's trespassing. If that happened, I
agree. I saw Don Lemon interviewing the pastor, and the pastor had willingly consented to the interview. Okay, so you can't say that he was trespassing then. But if you know that after that he was asked to leave and refused to leave, then of course, because then he's not behaving as a reporter.
Yeah, I'm really anxious to see the way I believe that the attorneys are going to look at it is they're going to like, you came for the purpose of, you came knowing what they were going to do. You understood what the mission was. You came in with the objective to record, to participate. You were participating, and so I believe that there's enough to charge them. Obviously, you know how things go, innocent to proven guilty. You can beat things in court, just because you're arrested for something doesn't mean that you're guilty. But I do believe that they would have enough. The question would be like, okay, well, if your friends are robbing the bank and they ask you to film it, right? Would you go in there and film them doing it? You're an accessory. And so I think they have enough to take them. I know they're going to try to get all their ducks in a row, but that girl was a clown, and I can't believe she did that. And so this is truly a violation of the FACE Act, and I'm really anxious to see how that turns out. But I mentioned that to mention this is that she has a Rolodex, right? She has a contact list of people who are willing to go out there and create chaos, right? Anarchy on her behalf. For what? For money. And these people, they have an attorney on call. This is what the BLM, the money that they were raising, Black Lives Matter, that money they used that money, the pot of money to pay for attorneys. They had bail, bond money already put together when they were committing all these crimes in Atlanta, when they were burning down the city of Atlanta after there was a shooting involving Rayshard Brooks, I think his name was. And when they were protesting, there were people who don't even live in Georgia who were down here protesting. But the things that they were doing was lighting things on fire. They burned down the Wendy's and things like that. Their job was to create anarchy, right? Yeah. In midst of the protesters. These are people these are higher professionals. This is what they do for a living. And I think they even captured at that church one of the guys who's been documented before in other locations protesting. These guys are on. So again, these are people who don't like America, or they're looking for a quick buck. They're willing to commit these crimes and then force feed a narrative that's not true, right? That's the problem. And our media is complicit in it. Why do I say that? Just like Ryan was saying, they're not focusing on people positively protesting, doing the right thing. They want the drama. They want to showcase something that's going to get them money. Everything in this country.
Bread and circus.
Oh, yeah. It's disgusting.
I agree with you. And I know that in my perspective, that there is an ultimate objective to create more of a surveillance, more control, which I object to. I think that, my Constitution is a beautiful document. Same. It should be cherished. And it seems like it's being chipped away at. You said this word, you view these people as terrorists. Ever since 9/11, that term is very heavy. If you're labeled as a terrorist, you no longer have the right to habeas corpus anymore. The government can surveil you. And now under the Biden administration, that surveillance that would have been illegal is now admissible in court. So we're just progressively snowballing into looking at each other as an enemy. And, which you correctly said, on January 6th, you're looking at it and you're like, this looks like an operation. I'm looking at the George Floyd riots. I thought the same thing, how we were demonizing, Kyle Rittenhouse and him to being this, white supremacist to gen up more hatred into this country. I don't think it's a coincidence that this is all going down. The cameras are pointed at Minneapolis right now.
Again.
Bruce Springsteen wrote a song about it even. Did you see that?
Yeah, and you got the Hollywood elites are all wearing their pins on the red carpet. It's all manufactured. Yeah. But I find the larger image in this is that it's creating an appetite for more surveillance. Because what will happen, and if hopefully I'm wrong, is that something else will pop off. They're trying to get it with these tragic events where you have like Freddie and Good, where they ultimately have their lives that are lost. It's going to incite people to get up and create more chaos. And I think that is kind of where we're headed. And and what happens from that is that you have people who will go to our officials and say, well, we got to give a tank to the small police department now because they might have this riot. And and we got to give them more SWAT gear and, more potent pepper spray. That's what I object to, is that I want us to really view what we're looking at and understand that we have rights that are crucial. And there is like Jeff was saying, I've taken those methods of protest where I stand up and I am interjecting towards a leader and giving my grievances, which I find is a very poignant way to protest, as opposed to creating or busting a window out or spray painting a building.
So Morgan, let me ask you this then, right? Because I think you bring up a valid point. So I would turn it back to you and say, woe is the citizens of this country that fall for this trick, right? This is a trick. So the question is, if you know that the government is weaponizing terror, they're weaponizing fear, and with the intent to get you to relinquish your rights willingly, you have to give them up. Just like they create an incident overseas, get you to hate that leader so you can agree to go to war. They've already agreed, they've already decided to do it. They need you to act like it was your decision, right? So they've already decided to take your privacy rights away. They already decided to do it. They need to get you to believe that it was your decision, that you asked them to do it. So the question is, if you are falling into the trap, whose fault is it, right? You can't blame the trap setter. You have to blame the person who fell into the trap. And I believe, and this is what I was saying earlier, is that we as a people are failing, right? We are falling into the trap. We are buying into the propaganda, right? We can't tell and discern the difference between, a false flag event. We live in a country where they'll make you sick and then sell you the cure. This is who we're dealing with, right? And so when you understand that, you look at the way our government moves differently. And when you understand who is in the pockets of our politicians and you understand how things work, then you start to say, okay, hold on, I think we're being played. And if we're being played, now what do we do differently as a citizen group to get back control and take that power back, right? So just like how the federal government can threaten a state to get them to comply with certain things they want, all by dangling a couple dollars in front of them. The idea is like, hey, if you do it our way, we'll give you funding. If you don't, we'll take that funding away. So this is kind of how the game is played. They can't just take it because it's a crime for them to do it. You have to give it away. And that's what we are doing. And so granted, you can be mad at how the government decides to do it, but I'm mad at the people, I'm mad at the people. We're the overseers of this power.
You make such an amazing point. There is a time in the not too distant past when I think, whatever you want to say, the ruling class became afraid of the American population. You had Occupy Wall Street, quote unquote, on the left, and you had the Tea Party on the right, and they actually converged on going after the Wall Street establishment for all of, I forget exactly what it was. Maybe Morgan, you remember, but there was a certain thing with Wall Street and bailing out Wall Street, I think it was, and they converged. They were literally the same, left and right. And that was then later, it both fell apart. The whole thing came apart at the seams. And I think that's the, go ahead. That's the threat to the establishment, that Americans would actually be more united.
Well, what works hand in hand with our elites is the media. The media is playing a big hand in what's happening right now with Occupy Wall Street. There's a direct correlation with them speaking about race. It was this big thing, and that's what broke up those unified effort between, you had the signs at the bottom saying we are the 99% at these protests. So I think, I think that's a big issue as well. I do hold the citizen accountable in the sense that they should know better. But I also know that no one is impenetrable to propaganda.
True.
Everyone, I probably have elements in my mind. If you guys pick my brain, I might be propagandized somewhere, and you guys
never.
So,
never.
Yeah.
No, you're perfect, but I'm going to dig up that thing I was referring to before.
Well, I know what I said. So.
All right, we'll see. The video doesn't lie unless
Jeff,
it's AI.
She'll drink a little bit of wine off camera, and it'll be okay. You'll figure
that makes everything okay. Hey, we never. It's okay that this it took a different turn than we expected. But before we say goodnight to Nathan, can we get into a little bit more about his assessment of the Preddy shooting? Would that be okay?
Yes, and I do. I'm going to let you ask the next question, Jeff. I have a question from your last show on Preddy, because 3 days ago. I don't think you have made any new assessment since then.
No.
All right, let's look at something you said on your show, and then. By the way, I don't know if I should say this before or after the clip, but your delivery is great, Nathan. The way
Thank you.
the way you're fair, and it's hard to tell which direction you're going in. And I don't think you're doing it just to be like Mr. Compromise. You're doing it because you're sincere, right? And you think he's going one way, and then he goes the other way. This doesn't do it justice because it's edited down, but you take your time and you talk for a while. But let's just take a look at this.
Fill his back full of lead after you take the gun from him. Look at the agent's position as Alex is trying to get up off. You guys, this is an execution. Is the agent just that oblivious? He's not even aware. What is Alex doing? Where's the threat? You got to define the threat. Where is it? He's on his knees surrounded by 7 agents. The only way this would ever be justified is if they can prove that in this moment, even after his gun was taken, that he reached for one of the agents' weapons in their holster, you guys. That is the only justification to be able to justify this. That's it.
Well, one other possible defense that I would ask you to consider is that they didn't know he had been disarmed. Isn't that a possible defense?
No.
Why not?
Or that he might have had a second weapon. Is that what you mean, Jeff?
Not, I mean that too, but even if
that's what I was.
Even aside from that, why isn't simply that? In other words, because it seemed to me through your commentary, you were saying that the threat was that he was armed, and you were saying because he had been disarmed, that removed the threat. So if you're acknowledging that's the threat, why isn't it still the threat if they don't know that he's been disarmed?
Because you can't shoot someone simply because they're armed. Right? You just can't shoot someone just because they're armed. And so the question is going to be, even though we make these split-second decisions and things like that, it still has to be reasonable, right? It still has to be objectively reasonable. Just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. And they're looking at the totality of the circumstances when they're making these assessments. And so I could have shot a lot of people in my career, ask me out of how many of those that I could have shot, how many of those I would have actually been considered justified. Just because a person is armed, the question is, at what point was it a threat to you? How did he manifest that threat? Did he ever manifest the threat? The threat has to be manifested before you can actually take action. So I've had encounters with people who were trying to commit suicide and they had the gun down to the side of their body, right? How do you manifest a threat? By raising your arm in my direction. Then I'm taking you out. There's no questions asked. They're going to say, well, what made him become a threat? At what point was he a threat? The moment he started to lift his hands, he'd lift his arms up. Well, if you're looking at it, if he's standing sideways and you're looking at a face of a clock and he's standing sideways, right? You follow me? Mm-hmm. And his hand and the gun it's at 6:30. All right. At what time does it need to raise to before he's considered a threat to me, right? And so this is where you start playing this game of how long does it take to get from 6:30, you know what I mean? Right. So this is the reality of the game. And so the question in this moment, if the gun was always in his holster, he never reached for it, the agent reached for it. So now in that moment, the agent is disarming him. The onus is on the agents to communicate with each other. Hey, you guys, listen, one thing I noticed about that, there's 7 of them there. This is why I'm saying they're not trained to do this level of interaction with citizens. Because the way I was trained, when you are multiple officers dealing with the suspect and you're trying to get them to comply, someone takes point, someone takes lead. Hey, I got his arm, I got his left arm. Okay, hey, I got his right arm. Okay, good. I got his legs pinned. Okay, hey, I'm choking him. I got his throat. Don't worry about it. His hands are secure. Okay, who has handcuffs? This is how it works in a huddle of officers getting ready to detain and arrest somebody who is who's resisting. And mind you, he's passively resisting. All right. No one in there is going to be able to say, hey, he was reaching for his holster. We pinned him down. And as he was reaching for his holster, I shot him. You're justified. Right. Mm-hmm. No, this was the agent is trying to get the gun out. He's struggling. He's struggling to get the gun out of his waistband. And then as he's doing that and tugging at his gun, The other agent reaches for his gun and he draws his weapon as this agent is trying to, well, why would you draw your weapon? And an agent has it secured on his hand. This is what I'm asking you, and this is what I can hear an attorney say on the stand to this agent. Well, agent so-and-so, while you were observing this interaction, because here on the video, this video is considered the best evidence. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Is that you in that green shirt, agent? Yes, that's me. Okay, you're watching the agent in the gray shirt, and he looks and he sees a weapon. He grabs a weapon. Did you could see that's happening, right? Oh, I could see that. The agent's in a position where he's gonna have to say, yeah, I see that. Because if you don't say you see it, you're done on the stand, right? You're done. Because then now, where did your perception of the threat come from? You cannot lie. So now you're saying, okay, I heard someone say gun, and okay, well, did you see the gun? No, I didn't see. So you shot a man and you never saw a gun? You see how these attorneys are word wizards. They get on the stand and they will tear them apart. So again, in this situation, you have to identify the threat. You have one agent. They're going to put him on the stand too. Well, did you articulate? Did you communicate with your team? What was going on? No, I was just pulling out the gun and, well, that's poor training. And this goes back to what Morgan was saying. They're so poorly trained to deal with this level of they're not qualified to deal with this type of engagement with the citizens. And so now you have the situation, the gun is removed. Now the question is, if you don't see a firearm, the gun was already moved by an agent, how do you justify shooting him 9 times? The problem is you can't articulate it on the stand. You could say, well, I heard somebody say, well, he heard the gun go off and so he shot. Okay, agent, every time you hear the gun goes off, you're going to pull your weapon and just start firing at somebody? How do you answer
Well, you
that?
said it would be a defense if he was reaching for the gun of one of the agents. So I'm not making this argument. I'm just asking you.
No, not you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just asking you if the argument were made, is it plausible? So could they perhaps argue in the same way that if he was reaching for to try to grab one of the agent's guns, that they saw him moving his arm in such a way that made him think he was reaching for his gun? Is that a different thing?
Yeah, that's the only plausible. That's why I said that's the only plausible justification you're going to be able to argue.
No, but he could be reaching for his own gun is what I'm saying.
No, but he couldn't have, because at that moment, you could see where his arms are. So the issue with the video is you can clearly see his arms are in front of him, and you can clearly see his back. You can see his waist. You can see his back is exposed. His shirt is up. You see his legs are tucked. You see his buttocks. And then here's the other thing. You have agents who are grabbing him. You have 7 agents. The question is, what are they grabbing? What are you guys doing? It's 7 of you. You guys don't know. Each one of you guys can pick a body part. It's 7. He has 4 limbs. You mean to tell me you guys couldn't get a limb and get it together? So the question is here, and here's the other thing too, you guys have to remember is, how are they trained to deal with situations like this? Is this training a part of, did they execute their training properly? Say they are trained to properly subdue an individual, right? Does this look like a part of their training? You know what would happen? They're going to bring their training instructor on the stand, and they're going to play this video, and they're going to say, hey, we have 7 agents here. You are in charge of training them on defensive tactics. Is this the proper training that we see on page 57 of your manual? How to deal with a person when you have one offender and multiple agents? Did they follow the training? And guess what he's going to say? Because he's testifying now. He's going to be like, that's not how we were trained.
Well, look at them right now. What should they have done that they didn't do?
No one, it's a clusterfuck, right? Let's be honest.
That's true.
Let's be honest. Everybody, no one, you know what it is? No one knows what to do. Look at them. No one knows what to do. They don't know how to use any type of defensive tactics. They're not trained properly.
Right. Well, it's about the arms, right? It's largely about the arms. They're trying to.
Yeah, but look, you have 7 agents. One agent at the scene did an amazing thing. He took the gun. Yeah. Right? The question is, did he communicate? Why? The real question is, why did this agent draw his weapon? He's the one in the hot seat. Sir, why did you feel the need to draw your weapon? We want to hear you explain and articulate your reasoning. Because if one agent took the gun, what were you looking at?
Well, how soon the agent who disarmed him It really wasn't that much time between the moment he disarmed him and when the first gunshot went off. How soon was he supposed to, and we don't even know really if he yelled out that he had disarmed him, but how soon is he supposed to do that?
There is no rule, right? There's no rule. The question is, what is the best practice? You know, if you had a group of officers in this situation, this all comes down to one: training, experience, common sense. You know, as an officer and you're in a situation like this, who's taking lead?
Right.
So you pause it right there. Okay. Now they're still wrestling, right? With the gun.
Yeah.
He's drawing his weapon. You know, the question is why? Why? No one else did. And here's the other thing: when they start to analyze these things, they're like, okay, listen, would the average officer in this same situation or agent, would they have done the same thing? You know, what would a reasonable agent do in this position? No one else drew their weapon. Even the person grabbing the gun didn't draw his weapon. So the question
isn't one obvious possibility that he saw that he was armed, that Preddy was armed?
Yeah, and then look at the position of that agent. They're going to say, should you have also seen that he was armed? What were you looking at? You know, and these are questions we don't have the answers to, right? So we're just theorizing. But here's the thing. And then he goes and it's almost like it's a press contact, right?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that we know that through this rapid recruiting, initiative that is happening by ICE, they've cut the training down to 6 weeks. Some of the classes they've cut are Spanish speaking, but more notably de-escalation skills. And they point to the fact that a lot of these members are former military, former law enforcement. Me personally, I have an objection to if they are former military. That means they probably should take a little more of a de-escalation class, just given the fact that, you know, they're stationed to go to war, look at the other as enemy, and they're trained.
I disagree, and I'm gonna tell you why when you're finished. I disagree with that.
I'm done. That's kind of what I had to say on that.
I think the military is better trained than law enforcement. I think they're better trained. I think they. I get what you're saying, though. I don't disagree with that, and I think that you're going to have those one-offs, right? I think anytime you're dealing with someone from the military or anyone who's dealt with any type of trauma or PTSD, they're going to be a problem in law enforcement. You know, and that's no judgment. That's just the reality. There's a possibility that can come back, right? And be an issue. I also believe that law enforcement should have a similar training pattern as our military. The reason why we have so many issues in this country, honestly, I think we do pretty good on shootings as officers, to be honest. When you look at the amount of encounters that they have with citizens and violent offenders and arrests, talking about almost like, you know, a lot, like 9 million or 90 million arrests or something crazy like that, or 10 million arrests a year, or 9 million encounters, I think 10 million arrests, you know, then when you equate that with maybe like 1,200 people that lose their lives, unfortunately, in a police encounter, one could argue that the officers do a really great job. I think the problem is the lack of consistent training, right? Like, for example, we shoot on average, officers shoot twice a year to qualify, right? And they only have to do one class of defensive tactics their entire career, you know, where they should, defensive tactics is like fighting, knowing how to grapple and knowing how to disarm and things like that. That should be something you take 3 times a year and requalify 3 times a year. This is a country where, you know, the officers don't have to re-qualify on a running exam, right? You pass one time your whole career, you're good. And you see officers, I had a case I had to work as an expert witness where an officer, he was trying to arrest an illegal immigrant, actually. And in the process of him trying to arrest him, the illegal, the victim, he resisted. He was passive resisting. And the sheriff officer, he died. He died. He had a heart attack on the scene, and they tried to charge him, who was actually my client. They tried to charge him with murder of the officer. And so, but when you look at the health of the officer, he shouldn't have been. He wasn't qualified to work. You get what I'm saying?
His fitness.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
And so, when we talk about training, to your point, the military has a very stringent training process. that when you train to that degree that they do, you make less mistakes, believe it or not. So in reference to what you're saying is those who have gone to war and things like that, I agree with that. But I would separate that from those who have that military and that training, because that consistency has a very positive impact on how the job is done.
Yeah.
Jonathan Ross, the ICE agent who shot Renee Good, is a 10-year veteran. So I think we can assume he was trained certainly when he was hired. But was he retrained in the middle of it? And if not, should he have been?
Was he was in the military prior to, you saying?
Yeah, he did.
No, I don't know. I just know that he worked for ICE for 10 years.
He was in the military. He was.
Yeah, he did deployments to Iraq.
Yeah. My question is, should he have been retrained in that time, or are they retrained? Do you know?
They're honestly, I don't know how their process works because a lot of when you're a federal office or when you work in the feds, they do like these lateral transfers. I don't know how exactly they work. I'm assuming that they have to be trained, obviously, under the ways of ICE and things like that. But I know that they give them some latitude, but I don't know how that works specifically. But even in his situation, for example, I've heard that he was dragged by a vehicle. And so people are saying that could have been a trigger response for him.
PTSD or something. Yeah.
PTSD. I was also dragged by a vehicle, right? One of the reasons why I was like, I don't think I could do it again because of my fear of being in a situation like that. I've had nightmares about, freezing up on my arm, not working and things like that, or me trying to save someone and then my arms collapse and I can't use them. So I understand. And so I can relate to that in a sense. At the same time, I'm also going to take myself out of that. And because my assessment with that was at the end of the day, it's a vehicle coming at you. People are saying, well, the tires were turned. I said, we don't look at tires. We're looking at a vehicle coming. And so, but I don't think those last two rounds were intentional. It sounded like an unintentional double.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you were talking about, with Alex Preddy, 9 or 10 rounds. Now the 3 rounds. How are you trained, right? So my understanding is, depending on officers, different departments, they are taught to shoot until the threat is no more. So the question is there a number? We've heard from some previous legal people and former DOJ, they're like, well, in some places it's 3 rounds, then wait. Some places it's 6 or less. My question to you is, how were you trained?
I was trained to shoot to eliminate the threat. And so that's usually the universal teaching for law enforcement in the US.
So what does that mean though?
That means if a person, it's given that way to give latitude, right? So the idea is, if I have to use lethal force, the purpose is to kill you, right? It's to end your life.
That's the key.
That's
what people don't realize,
Yes.
So it's like if it's either legal to use lethal force or it's not. And if it is, it doesn't really make much difference how many times you shoot because there's no such thing as being too dead.
That's not correct. Yeah. And the idea though is people are really complaining about the optics, right? They look at there's a humanity aspect to it, which I agree. There's an excessiveness to it, which I agree. And there's a lack of discipline in it. Mm-hmm. So with Preddy's situation, it looks barbaric, right? It's okay. I shot 2 times. I felt like he was a threat. There's a lack of trigger discipline. There's a lack of self-control that people want to see within these agents. They want to know that, okay, hey, I did shoot him 2 times. Because here's the reality of it. I stopped the threat, meaning that he stopped. But if he would have shot him once or twice, there could have been a possibility to still save his life, right? And say, you get what I'm saying, Morgan? So
yeah, I was going to say that's another thing that we haven't talked about is these 2 instances. Their first response after the shooting was not to render aid. They didn't.
Which I have a problem with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have the Renee Good case where you have this I believe a physician. I don't know what his direct title was, saying, "Can I please give her aid?" And their person's like, "I don't care, no," because it's more just this. It like you said, it seems very undisciplined, not trained. You cannot take yourself out of the situation and understand where you're at. Everything's very reactionary.
But you know what? Let me just interrupt, Morgan. When we had Rachel Van Landingham on the other show, she was very much not taking the pro-police position at all in general. But she said that she understood that they denied letting the physician give care because they didn't know if he's really qualified, if he's really a doctor, and they might have liability.
Well, they should be taught in first aid. They should be taught at the bare minimum of how to plug a wound.
Oh, I think they are, aren't they, Nathan? Yeah.
They should be. And that attorney is right. I would have loved to have talked to her, picked her brain, but she's an attorney, and a lot of them are really in the clouds and things like that. Until then, they have a loved one that's a victim of these things. A lot of times people change their tune. It's the issue again with ICE is it's not that they have a job to do. It's we want you to do your job and be professionals. And unfortunately, the PR behind what they're doing, their attitude. People are seeing a lot of bravado. They're seeing a lot of ego. They're seeing a lot of bruise. It seems like they're reacting instead of responding. They're reacting out of kind of like irritation, and so there's a lack of patience dealing with the citizens. And I get it. I had to get tempered into it as well. But again, that's my job function, and so it's different as an officer. We are taught from the very beginning. Listen, they're going to call you names. They're going to tell you this, do that. You just have to shut up and deal with it. These agents aren't used to that, and the training is different. And again, they're operating outside of their effectiveness, I think, and they're not qualified to do the things that they're doing alone. And so that's where we're having these issues. But the professionalism and the training, and then you have their leadership that's blindly backing them. And it's obviously when they're making mistakes and just own it. Listen, we're going to look into that. Let us further investigate before we give any assessments. But, I did a reaction to an interview on 60 Minutes with the chief of Minneapolis and another head of ICE, and they were asking them questions. And when a question was asked to the ICE supervisor or the leader of ICE in Minneapolis, she said, "Hey, can you just see and understand why people are having an issue with what you guys are doing?" He's like, "No." He's like, follow the law, damn it. Like, do what you're told, and he's right, but he's saying it at the wrong time, right? Like, there's a way to say it. There's a way to convey that, to give people confidence. And there's a way, it's simple as like, listen, I do understand. I know these things, sometimes can be misconstrued by the media. You guys don't get the full story. Well, guess whose responsibility is to give the proper and full story? It's your job. And so, I back what they do. And I love that they're out here doing their job. But part of their job too is leadership, explaining what their job is, explaining these incidents. Someone needs to be in the media immediately saying, "Hey, this is what happened, you guys. This is what's going on. We're looking into it." Or unfortunately, we believe that our agent was doing this a little excessive. So you got to throw a little salt on one of them just to kind of show that you're being even kill. But blindly just acting like they're not messing up I think is a very bad move.
Well, you say somebody in the media should do it, and earlier I asked if you're familiar with Andrew Branca and Bill Shipley, and you weren't. But are there any other legal analysts who you're familiar with that you would recommend and who have credibility and we should pay attention to them besides you?
No, not them. Not them. I'm saying people who are representatives of the agency. You're
talking about like DHS.
Oh, okay, well, that's fair. But anyway, all right. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you, but can I ask the question anyway? Is there anybody who addresses these kinds of issues in the media that we should pay attention to?
I like the guy who's on CNN. I can't think of his name. He's the only conservative on CNN who's having debates.
Scott Jennings.
Oh, I love that guy. Yeah, I think he would be good because I believe I like that he's fair. He has his moments. I think everybody has their team that they play on. But I like the way he articulates things. He's very patient. He communicates well. I believe he'd be able to get the message off pretty good. Who else? I mean, I think they should put me up there. I'd be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Scott Jennings, I think he's good too, but he is, he has a pro-conservative bias. In fact, that's his role.
He's pro-conservative.
And also, I'm not sure that he has expertise in, police issues, legal issues, per se. Anybody who's like specifically in your realm?
In my,
Greg Dillon, my co-host on Probable Cause.
is Greg Dillon he's a former FBI agent?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
I would love to. I thought he was going to be on time. I was going to pick his brain. I applied to the FBI, and I was in the runnings to go actually, and I ended up getting injured and ended up taking me out of the race for that, unfortunately. So I remember when I was watching one of the videos you guys were on, I was like, oh wow, he's former FBI. So that's going to be a cool conversation.
Well, Nathan, if you were to bat your eyelashes seductively at me, we would be willing to have you on Probable Cause.
Oh man, I would love it. I would love it. Yeah, I would love it.
Consider it done. Consider it done.
Man,
we have a lot of cross-pollination going on in our 3 podcasts.
I love it. I love it.
No, it's
All right,
very.
well, before we say
good
goodnight, is there anything else other than that issue of the officer yelling out, or should have yelled out that he disarmed him? Is there anything else that you can say about how they could have handled the situation better?
So this is what I would say. Here's the thing. I don't know. It's so hard to say because I don't know what all was violated. I'm disappointed in the agents because if they were better at their job, he would have lived, right? The idea is that the quality of service I provide is a direct reflection of how good I am at providing that service. Part of the service that these agents are responsible to providing, watch, he's going to turn around and spray the lady now, right? So part of the service that we're providing is I have a responsibility to get you detained and arrested as quickly and as effective and efficiently as possible. When I'm not good at doing that, I'm increasing the probability and the likelihood for me to have to use more and more force. If I see you as a problem, as an issue, as a threat, I need to detain you, wrap you up, snatch you up as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And what you see here is I see a lot of agents who really don't know what to do next. They're just kind of fumbling around with them. And the longer these things transpire, the greater risk of someone getting injured is. When you see officers, and again, we can criticize them all the time and things, or different officers and agencies all the time. But the reality is when someone does it really good, they never really get credit for, right? We never talk about those things, but there are videos of officers who are slam dunking these things on a regular basis, and what you see is you see good tactics, you see good strategy, and you see great communication. You always start with communication. The question at the end of the day is, could they have de-escalated this without having to put their hands on them? Mm-hmm. And the question is, just because the officer or the agent could react the way he did doesn't mean that was his only option. And so the law doesn't really care about what tactics the officer uses, the agent uses, because if you're authorized to do it, the law says you're authorized to do it. So now the question is, if I was in that position, would I have done it differently? Yeah, maybe I would have given him 3 more chances before I slapped him up. But the reality is there is other options. So the question is, what could have been done differently? The agent could have had another conversation with him. The agent probably didn't have to spray him. The agent could have just called his friends over and say, listen, we're going to go ahead and put you under arrest. We need you to comply. We need you to get, and talk him through it. The moment you push, grab, or try to strangle someone on your own as an agent, as an officer, the fight is on. And it's not easy getting somebody detained. The agent could have waited for everybody else to come over and they had the conversation. He could have asked them. He said, this is what I need you to do. I need you to get on the ground. I need you to put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest. We're going to detain you. Why are you detaining me? Because we've asked you several times to do X, Y, Z, and you didn't, and you're not complying. He could have allowed everybody to gather around. They could have properly staged on him, and they could have tackled him, taken him down that way. Would it have changed the outcome? Maybe not. Or maybe it would have. The question is, was it necessary to go hands on with him in that moment by himself? Could there have been a different way, a different approach? Would it have changed the outcome? Possibly. And we can look at this in other situations too, with even Renee Good. The question is, if the agent would have approached her car more respectfully and said, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. We need you to comply. Would she have driven off that way if he never grabbed her handle? So the question is, yes, he's allowed to do it, was that the best way to go about doing it to get the results that you wanted? And that is where we talk about good tactics, good de-escalation techniques, and good professionalism. And I think that's where we see the best results overall. The only time we need to be that aggressive without any question is when the danger element raises to a point to where I don't have time to be patient with you. So if they're not in a point where they're that dangerous or they are a threat, then I believe that we have the time and we should exercise the patience to deal with them accordingly up until that point. And so that's kind of what I preach when I'm educating officers or when I'm talking to people just in general or talking to police departments, that if you have the time and they're not a danger, then you need to exercise patience. That is your responsibility as a civil servant to the people of this country.
Well, this is a situational awareness type of response that I hear from you.
Yes. Yep.
And that means you have to be clinical, I think is one way, or just even tempered. And I know Morgan has brought up various reasons why she thinks that is a problem. And I do see her point that they're not even tempered, but to think like what you're suggesting requires somebody to really not react when they're spitting in your face and whatnot.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, but that goes back to do you have the qualifications to deal with this level of law enforcement? It's just a different functionality that you're not accustomed to. You're border patrol and you're dancing around on the streets, right? That's not your function, right? You're out of your element. If you put a bunch of officers who work the city, beat cops, and you put them at the border of Mexico and you know what I mean, in Texas, like we're looking at you like we don't know. Do we do this, or you're just doing things wrong because you're not used to it? And so, you know, you put me in some situations dealing with ICE, I'm confused. I don't really know what to do, and I'm not confident in what I'm doing. And what I saw with them engaging with Preddy and even with Renee Good is that they weren't confident. They didn't know what to do, and because it's not their normal function as a law enforcement apparatus, that's just not their function. You know, it's like you're taking a heart doctor and telling him to work on someone's foot. Yeah, he's a doctor, but that's not his specialty. And if you don't have enough training in that area, you're going to hesitate. You're going to do things improperly. You're going to be impatient. You're not as confident. And what I see is a lack of confidence from these guys. It looks like you just put a bunch of high school kids and told them to get this person and put him in handcuffs. Look how long they didn't even detain him. They shot him. Right.
Do you think the average local police department would have handled that situation better?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Only, again, they would have focused primarily on communication, and, you know, they would have spoke to him a lot more. Right. The conversation would have been different. And granted, and what would have made him get shot is if he would have reached for that gun. You know, I think that agent panicked. I think he lacked situational awareness. I think that he just was not. I think he was suffering from what we call tunnel vision. Right. That's a tunnel vision thing. You know, I've experienced it. I don't know what it is about tunnel vision, but it's almost like you got to get it out of you. You have to go through some things. You got to get it out your system. I had my first tunnel vision moment when I fired my weapon, and I can't tell you what happened 10 minutes after and 10 minutes before. I just can't remember. Something about the adrenaline, you're just so gone. You know, I thought I was driving. I was chasing these guys. I thought I was driving for just 3 blocks. Kind of find out I was almost a mile out of the area that I was patrolling in. You know, I couldn't remember what turns I was at and where I was. It's weird. It's a weird phenomenon. I can't explain it, but tunnel vision is real. And so, but when you have officers or agents who've never been in high stress situations, these guys are probably pencil pushers that carry badges and a gun. Their job is to investigate and go drive and pick somebody up. They're not in the best of shape. You see a lot of them are rounded body agents. These guys are desk workers, a lot of them, right? They don't really chase after and do all this fancy stuff. That's not their function. And so they don't know what it's like to sit there and have to detain someone who's not cooperating. That is a real thing. And so you get a bunch of them together and no one is taking the lead. One smart guy grabbed the gun, you know, and then the other person shot. And so and even in that moment, you see people, even with the Renee Good video, you probably missed this, But when that shooting happened, you see an agent falling down next to the car. He's panicked. What does that say to me? He's not paying attention. Right. So look how the reaction of the agents when the gun goes off. Look at how they respond.
They're not even used to it from that
There
standpoint.
you go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think it's important to note that, there's in 2025, it was 10,000 ICE agents added to the base, done so with only 6 weeks of training.
That's crazy.
And
let's
we're
take
actually earmarking for another 10,000 by 2027.
Let's take a quick look at a clip from a PBS report about that.
To make its recruitment quota, ICE has removed all age requirements and cut its training program length in half. The administration is also offering student loan forgiveness and lucrative overtime packages and signing bonuses of up to $50,000. It's pushing those perks in traditional places like job fairs, as well as almost anywhere potential recruits spend their time online. So far, the administration says its recruitment campaign is working, recently announcing that it will finish hiring 10,000 agents within days. An effort that is reshaping the face of law enforcement on America's streets.
Yeah. I what it reminds me of what we spoke about when one of these episodes that Greg called in, was that I was talking about this as being done haphazardly. If you are pushing for a high number of recruits and giving them these incentives, you are not going to all the time get high quality folks. Well, she disagreed with me. But we have a whistleblower. He was a 25-year Army veteran or Green Beret, where he worked for the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, which was a non-government organization. I bring that up because a story came out that the recruitment for this aid site, they were recruiting people in North Carolina and in Florida that were a part of the Infidels Motorcycle Club, where they hated Muslims, and over 1,000 people were attacked at these aid sites. He's alleging that these people, now that their contracts are up, are now working for ICE. So you have individuals who were ex-military, they're trained. On paper, they would probably be great for this job, but they have a preconceived ideology that seems to be a problem. And that's, he's alleging that. Of course, there is no proof because we don't really know what all these people's names are. We know the main person. Is someone else doing that? Or
not me.
Oh, did we lose Nathan?
Actually, I think we just lost Nathan. Something there.
Who's putting in all these images?
Well, I kept trying to put mine up, but it seemed like it went down and then it started sliding.
I don't know.
I guess we'll just wait for him to come back.
We might get Nathan here in a second.
But do you guys have comments on that? Because now he's
I mean, I think the point has been made. I think it's been nope, there he is. Let me bring him back on. Sorry about that.
That's me.
Okay. Cool.
But did you catch all that, Nathan, or?
I caught everything but the last 10 seconds. You were saying about the Gaza.
Yeah, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. This whistleblower who came out of that, where he had witnessed them shooting at unarmed, hungry Palestinians that they were supposed to be feeding. Have now their contracts have ran out, and now they are allegedly working for ICE. I say that because that's a conflict of interest where you have these groups that espouse this ideology that's problematic. But on paper, these are ex-military. You would say that they're a model recruit, but they carry this ideology. And I see that if you have this push to have an influx in ICE agents, you are going to have that. You are not going to get high quality if you're using those mechanisms.
That's 100% correct. I think, and that's with any profession. We've had the similar problem in law enforcement. Is you just have an open door policy. You start when I started policing. You weren't allowed to have visible tattoos. You couldn't have a beard. What happened now is that you're so desperate for recruitment that you're willing to have these lax rules now. You're letting people in who, oh, okay, well, they before you couldn't smoke weed and be an officer. Now you can smoke weed. You tried a little heroin. Okay, cool. It's all right. You tried crack one time. It's cool. It's all right. So they're making all these concessions, right? They're allowing this, and it does have an impact. It does. And you can see it in the behavior. You had to, in the beginning, like being an officer was such like a prideful like profession, for the longest. And you had people who abused their power and things like that. But there was a time where it was like, if you had the uniform on, there was a time where you can, not protest, but testify in court. You didn't need a body cam, right? There was just an integrity that you're supposed to have. Like, why would the officer lie? That used to be this blind trust. And then now we fast forward to this thing. Now we have officers who are, they join so that they can help their gang members out. They join because, they have this criminal thing they got going on the side. And so they're using that as a way. And the feds are no different, right? They have federal agents who became or who were groomed at a young age and, put into the feds. Border Patrol had a problem with that. ICE had a problem with that, where they had family members, distant family members who wanted them to have access and resources in the Fed so they can benefit their criminal enterprise. So yeah, when you put those rules down and you kind of become real lax because you want to increase the numbers, you're always going to get the undesirables and who were going to fake the funk for a little bit, but eventually, right, they become a liability. So I agree with you 100% with that. And obviously there really is no justification for sending or taking officers or agents who had that type of training in another country and think that could possibly not turn out to be an issue. You know what I mean? Not to say all of them would be, not to say that, but obviously that can raise some red flags, right? To just common sense red flags, just in general. People already have an issue with us marrying that country a little too much with things. I don't know. I just, unfortunately, the federal government operates different. Fed and state, we're separate, right? We're separate. We're like church and state. And the idea is that they do things differently. They move at the beat of their own drum. You could tell by the way they do their press conference. This so-and-so is a terrorist. That's how we feel. I investigated cases with military men who have done things that were like sexual assault things and things like that on civilians while they were like off the base. And I've had to work in conjunction with military investigators. And guess what? These things, once they get a hold, once I pass my investigation on to them, that's it. I can't follow up. I'm curious. I want to know. Everything is on a need to know thing. They operate differently. There's so much dirt and just wickedness that goes on behind the lines in our own country that the federal government is investing, like their military, that they do, that we can't get access to. We can't find out. You can't ask questions. They don't care how you feel. And this is our government, right? We don't have the power that they say and claim that we have over our own government. That's my issue, right? There is a lack of transparency from the federal government side. They're going to take on this investigation as well with the Preddy shooting. Oh, we're going to handle it ourselves. We'll keep you guys posted, right? You're not going to.
That sounds a lot like Israel. Israel does that.
Well, Fox is guarding the hen house, right?
There is a question where it used to be peace officers were your local law enforcement, and then at the federal level, it was the general welfare. It was the common good.
Yep.
You think about going way back, probably one of the most enraged populations are the South, Tennessee, places, Appalachia. You had the Tennessee Valley Authority that transformed that region with water projects and farm teaching projects. And, one thing that certainly is lacking is any kind of a mission orientation for the good of the nation like that. And then from that standpoint, it is in our interest that happens in our neighboring countries too, where a lot of the illegal immigrants come, because certainly if they're engaged in something productive in their home, then they're only going to come here to visit. They're not going to come here out of desperation. So
is there
that
anything wrong with the incentives that are offered for new agents to sign up, like the bonuses or for giving student loans? Does that attract a lower caliber, or is that really not an issue?
No, I think what causes the lower caliber is the reduction of training. It's the incentive is not the problem. I love it, the incentives. I think it's the reduction of the training time. Don't reduce the training. If not, there's not enough quality training. And the question is, what are you training them on? It's not even so much if you sit and train me for a year, but it's missing elements that are most important for me to do the job efficiently and effectively. You know, the issue is, how are you examining the character of the person that is taking the job? That's my main concern. You know,
that makes sense. Yeah, I don't see why high caliber people wouldn't be attracted by a $50,000 bonus just as much as low caliber people would be attracted to.
Well, I would say I would just have the rebuttal. Like, if you are, you know, like you said, Nathan, like being a cop was like this, you know, you were proud to be it.
Right.
You know, so it didn't really, you know, you weren't be like, oh, I'm going to get rich. I'm going to get the big house, the, you know, everything that I want. It's because I'm doing a service for my community.
But it was a cultural optimism, Morgan. It's just simply a $50 or $50,000 bonus is great, but you're talking about a broader sense of a cultural optimism, which right now the predominant emotion is rage. You're not going to think clearly if you're in a rage, no matter who you are, what side you're on. Isn't that what really kind of what you're getting at, though? It's not just one group or the other. It's across the board. Like, how many Americans are positive, have something positive to say about the Democrats or the Republicans? I mean, it's the people have a bad taste in their mouths when you talk about politics.
We need statesmen, real bona fide statesmen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
All right,
Nathan.
I accept, if elected, I will serve. Hey, Nathan, is your podcast on at any particular day or time, or do you just do it when you feel inspired?
I do when there's a calling, right? So I'm switching it up. I have this concept called the Crime Classroom, where I break down police body cam incidents, and I kind of give some insight into it. And then I look at these high profile cases that are in the media. Like, one that I'm breaking down is the Luigi Mangione case. And so I look at those things and I educate people on like investigative nuances, things that they're not really aware of. And I'm giving them insight on the tools that are used and kind of some issues that I see with the arrest or with the investigation. I just kind of educate the audience. I call it the Crime Classroom concept. So I do things like that as I get new information. Right. When I see controversial issues with police interactions, like shootings, I then break those down as well. Majority of them have been regarding white officers and black suspects or black victims, because that's where there's always this kind of race baiting, race hustling energy surrounding the topic. And a lot of times, like when people hire me to come and speak, I'm speaking at events and explaining like these things away. And so I usually spend a lot of my time breaking down those type of videos, just things that are highly controversial. So this shooting was very controversial, and I listened to the energy. I listened to the things that people are saying. I listened to the rhetoric, and I know how divisive the media and some of these activists can be. And what we see, what we have a rise in this country right now is what I call these EPVs, which is these emotional political vigilantes is what I call them. And that's what we see. It's a sense of entitled people who feel the need to come out here and physically break the law as their form of protest, and they get negative outcomes, and then they want to kind of complain about it. People want to rally behind it, you know. And so I try to speak out against those things, because I feel like there are people who talk about it that aren't mature enough to have the conversation and aren't willing to take their biases out. You know, I don't have a dog in the fight. I believe in, you know, just people doing the right thing and doing right by each other. And at the end of the day, calling out right and calling out wrong. And sometimes the citizen is wrong, the victim's wrong, or sometimes the agent or the officer is wrong. Sometimes both are wrong. And in this case, like Pretty, I believe both of them are wrong, you know, and that's okay to say that. And I feel like sometimes we get into these bubbles where we got to be on one side no matter what. And no, sometimes, you know, it's okay to say they're wrong. And here's where they went wrong, you know, and until we are able to have those honest discussions, I feel like this is going to just create more, you know, contention, right, amongst each other. And so on my channel, I try to just break these things down and I give just a very honest opinion. I've noticed that people just really appreciate that because things have gotten so polarized that they feel like you have to choose a side. And some people are really conflicted, right? They see something like, hey, I don't agree with that, but I understand. And they don't have a place to go where someone can just be honest with what they are seeing. A lot of times people just, they filter everything through their feelings and through their bias. And so I believe my channel has become a safe haven for people to like, I just want to hear, just kind of like that guy, the young kid who's doing like investigative journalism. I forgot his name, but this kid.
Oh, I know who you mean in Minnesota, that kid.
Yeah.
Nick, I've been watching Shirley? Is that his name? Nick Shirley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
People, and I love his content because you just want to know the facts.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to know your opinion. I want to know the facts. And so I think when people come to my channel, they look at they look at the content. When you read the comments, people are just like, I don't agree with you, but I appreciate you just laying the facts out. I don't like the police, but I appreciate you just being honest about the facts. People are tired of being in the echo chamber. People just want to know the facts and they want to understand them. And so I just give them a place to where I can explain it to them, you know, explain them like use of force, explain self-defense, explain what your rights are. And, you know, I get a little compassionate, you know, I have my passion moments and things like that as well. You know, you got to add a little sauce, but for the most part,
is there a live element? Is there a live element to it, or is it just something that can be watched recording and it doesn't really need to be seen live?
No, I do live. I do lives. Yeah. I do live.
Well, that's a reason people should subscribe, because if you're not on it at the same time, they won't know when you're on unless they subscribe, and they'll get notified. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. And the reason, I think what makes it challenging though for me is that I sometimes feel like I don't speak on everything. I like to speak on social issues as it relates to race, relations, policing, and things like that, because those are always these hot button topics. And I'm always battling with people within the Black community in reference to these issues. You know, it's kind of like fighting this victimhood mentality, you know, pushing back on a lot of these narratives that aren't true, you know, so that's a full battle within itself. And I understand, right? Like, it's not that I don't understand why some people within the community feel the way that they feel, but it's their lies, you know, their lies. A lot of them are lies. And so having that conversation, having it with compassion makes a difference. But at the same time, I also have it and say, this is the reality. You know, there was a big battle at one point last year I was having with going back and forth about police shootings, and I'm educating them. I say, hey, you know, white men get killed more than Black men, you know, by the police. And that set the internet on fire, just having that discussion. But then you bring the data, you bring the information, and then they move the goalposts. And then I move right there with them and say, okay, well, what you have to understand is case in point, I have a folder that I use that I have to pull out when I'm doing my live streams. I call it White People Too, my White People Too folder, because this is always kind of the attack that I get is that, well, what about white people? You know, white, I've never seen a white Breonna Taylor. I never seen a white George Floyd. I never seen a white Trayvon Martin. You know, I never seen a white Tamir Rice. I said, well, bless your heart. I got it for you right here. Let me get my White People Too folder. And it's a shame that you have to do that, but you have to fight. You have to fight truth with ignorance, you know, and that's kind of how I administer.
I think it's the other way around. You have to fight ignorance with truth.
Well, Nathan,
you have to fight truth with ignorance. Oh yeah, you have to fight
backwards.
That's right.
Backwards.
Nathan, I hope that you.
It depends which side you're on. The other side.
We've had you on a long time, more than we allotted for. So we
this is our longest show ever, I think. 2.5 hours.
Is it?
Yeah.
Nathan, I hope you come back, Nathan. It was fascinating. I think everything that you do on your shows it's very interesting. It's very engaging. It's very personal. And here you broadened the picture so people get to know you better. And I hope you come back. So thank you very much for joining us.
You're a cool dude in a loose mood. We love you.
I appreciate it. You guys are awesome.
Oh, we'll get the Hennessy. We'll get the white Hennessy.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Nathan. And thanks,
Thank
Morgan, Ryan, and thanks to our beloved audience. I think we made Stefan happy tonight because he was getting too much of a pro-police perspective, and it was a little bit
great.
more.
Man, shout out to you guys. I really appreciate it. Shout out to the audience. Thank you guys so much.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Good night.
Join us next Tuesday for Probable Cause. Wednesday, Ask the Inspector. And we will be back next Thursday on The Whiners.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
There is nothing that has been said about that man that isn't wonderful. And so they can't malign him. They can't malign him because we have the videos.